Chapter 41. In fact, there were two reasons for his question just now. First, he wanted to know what Lu Zhenguang's jade butterfly formula looked like, so that he could avoid making a mistake. Secondly, he wanted to know if Chu Ping'er truly loved him wholeheartedly. If there was anything that she was deliberately hiding, if she was hiding something, Chu Ping'er would never expect Yu Qianqiu to treat her wholeheartedly. He was afraid that she would be thrown onto the bed, stripped naked, and raped on the spot. After that, he would abandon her and kill her. Yu Qianqiu would never be reluctant to part with her. It was not wrong to say that he was ruthless. Although he usually laughed and laughed, deep down, he was still the boss of the underworld in his previous life. Think about it. How many people could become the boss of the underworld from nothing? How many of them were good people? Chu Ping'er leaned against Yu Qianqiu, lying docilely in his arms. She probably never thought that she had just escaped from the gates of hell. Yu Qianqiu's joking face showed a rare gentle expression. His fingers gently stroked Chu Ping'er's beautiful hair. Ping'er, don't go back to Wangquangsung. Come with me. Now. Chu Ping'er paused and said, I also want to go with you, but how can I explain to my master? My master has always been very good to me. I'm afraid that he will be worried if I leave without a word. Your master is Lu Wanqian's disciple? I'm really worried about leaving you alone in Wangquangsung. Moreover, Lu Zhenguang has ulterior motives towards you. Yu Qianqiu said worriedly. Hee. Chu Ping'er turned around and looked at him with a smile. What's wrong? Are you worried that I will be taken advantage of by Lu Zhenguang? Yu Qianqiu said solemnly. I'm not worried, I'm very worried. Both the grandfather and grandson of the Lu family are nothing good. And Wangquangsung, and that bunch of bullshit elders, are all beasts in human clothing. I know that better than you do. You're just a little disciple of Wangquangsung. How could you possibly defeat them? Although his words were not very pleasant to hear, Chu Ping'er knew that he was really worried about her. After a sweet smile, she said to him solemnly, Master has been very kind to me. I am an orphan. When I was very young, Master brought me up the mountain to cultivate. She has always treated me like her own daughter. Among all the female disciples, Master treats me the best. If I leave without saying anything, not only will Master worry, I will also feel very guilty. Is your master a man or a woman? Yu Qianqiu suddenly asked in an untimely manner. Woman, why are you asking this? Chu Ping'er asked curiously. Oh, then I'm relieved. Chu Ping'er was stunned for a moment, but she immediately reacted. She punched him again and said, Why is your head filled with all these messed up things? Yu Qianqiu laughed. In fact, he really wanted to say, You're too pure. It was no wonder that he would have such a thought. In his previous life, he had been through a lot of dirty things. He had seen too many dark things. When he looked at things, it was inevitable that he would consider more negative things. He belonged to the kind of person who was more suspicious and didn't trust others easily. Sigh. Looks like I can't persuade you. Yu Qianqiu sighed softly and suddenly hugged Chu Ping'er. What are you doing? Chu Ping'er cried out in surprise and joy. Yu Qianqiu smiled calmly and said, Do you trust me? Chu Ping'er was as happy as a cat in Yu Qianqiu's arms and nodded. Yu Qianqiu was moved. He lowered his head and kissed her forehead lightly. Then he said, Ping'er, listen to me. Remember what I said. I agreed to let you go back to Wangquangsung. It's not that I don't want you to stay. I really want you to stay. But I don't want you to be in a difficult position. If I see you in a difficult position, I will feel even worse than you. Do you understand? After you go back to Wangquangsung, you must remember to protect yourself at all costs. As long as you still have me in your heart, treat it as protecting yourself for me. You must make yourself well. Ping'er, remember, no matter what happens in the future, I will definitely find you. Even if I die, my soul will find you and let you know that I'm here. I don't want you to die. Chu Ping'er immediately covered his mouth and said with tears, I want you to come back to me alive. I will definitely live well, and wait for you to come back to me. Yu Qianqiu smiled gently and said, As long as you can do it, I will definitely do it. No one can stop me. Ping'er, you have to remember, our separation today is for a better reunion in the future. Chu Ping'er nodded desperately with tears in her eyes. Seeing that she was crying, Yu Qianqiu wanted to ease the atmosphere. He put her down and said, I have something to ask of you. Ping'er, will you agree? N. Chu Ping'er said with tears in her eyes. As long as I can do it, I will agree to anything. Yu Qianqiu said disapprovingly. This is something that you can do easily. I'm just afraid that you will not agree to it when the time comes. Do you not trust me that much? Chu Ping'er was a little angry, but she suddenly saw Yu Qianqiu's face revealing a trace of a strange smile. She couldn't help being startled, and said with slight apprehension, Don't tell me you want me to do that thing with you again? I already said that it's not convenient for Lu Zhenguang to live here. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. He immediately understood what she was talking about. He secretly thought that this girl's awareness was too high. He couldn't help but smile bitterly and said, Am I such a lowly person? Chu Ping'er was so embarrassed that her face turned red. She stamped her feet and said, If it's not that thing, then say it. I will agree to it, okay? This is what you said. You can't go back on your words. Yu Qianqiu put his mouth next to her ear and said softly, My hand is a little itchy. As he said that, his hand had already slid down the smooth skin of a certain someone's collar. Chu Ping'er's body trembled, but she didn't resist. She only heard her muttering, You still say that you're not a lowly person, but I've never seen someone more. Gradually, an uncontrollable moan came out of her mouth. Yu Qianqiu, who had succeeded in his plot, happily pulled out his hand and put it in front of his nose to smell it. He said, It smells so good. Chu Ping'er was so embarrassed that she almost couldn't lift her face. Wait for me. I will go out for a while and come back soon. Yu Qianqiu seemed to suddenly think of something. After saying that, he opened the door and went out, then closed the door. Chu Ping'er didn't know what he was going to do when he went out, so she hurriedly tidied up her collar that was loosened by that bad guy's hand. Yu Qianqiu came back very quickly. After he came in and closed the door, he took out a small exquisite bag and said with a smile, I just bought it, it's for you. Ah, it's a storage bag. What a beautiful storage bag. I have never used it before. Chu Ping'er, who received the gift, was very happy. After playing with it for a while, she suddenly frowned and said, This thing is very expensive. It must be hard for you to be alone outside. Why do you need to spend this money? Hee. As long as you like it, spending a little money is nothing. Your husband doesn't have anything else but money. In the storage bag, I have 100 high-grade spirit stones, 1,000 mid-grade spirit stones, and 10,000 low-grade spirit stones. You can keep it on you, in case you need it when I am not here, Yu Qianqiu said with a smile. Chapter 42. The items in the storage pouch were just as Yu Qianqiu had said. Chu Ping'er, who had used her divine sense to check, was shocked. She asked doubtfully, Where did you get so many spirit stones? Yu Qianqiu smiled and didn't answer her directly. He just hugged her and said, Take good care of yourself. Then he turned around and walked out. Chu Ping'er reluctantly shouted, I'll wait for you. Yu Qianqiu didn't tell her that he was living next door. He didn't go back to his room either. He went straight to Guan Yu's room and pushed the door open. Guan Yu had returned and was fiddling with a lot of things on the table. When he saw Yu Qianqiu, he nodded with a smile. It was a good feeling to have money to spend. Why do you have a woman's fragrance? Guan Yu's nose flared as he sniffed Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu was worried and impatiently asked, How long will it take to get to supporting Immortal Island from here? I want to go there as soon as possible. Guan Yu was startled, and his expression sank. Yu Qianqiu would naturally use the supporting immortal token to go to supporting Immortal Island. Once he used it, he would never have the chance to go back. However, his natal primordial spirit was in the hands of others. What could he do? He sighed and said, There's a shop on supporting Immortal Island in the 100 Flowers Valley. They use flying artifacts to transport things every day. If you show the supporting immortal token to the shopkeeper, they will naturally take you there. Yu Qianqiu pondered for a bit and had a plan. He patted Guan Yu's shoulder and sent him into his space without caring if he was happy or not. He also swept the things on the table into his space. Then, a long and thin pipe appeared in his hand. This was something he had bought outside. Today, when he was strolling in the market, a man suddenly pulled him to the side and asked if he wanted anything good. Yu Qianqiu asked him what it was, and the man pulled him to the side, took out the thing, and told him that it was called Fallen Immortal, and it was specially made to deal with cultivators. To put it bluntly, it was a sleeping gas specially made for cultivators. It was very effective against cultivators below the core formation stage. Yu Qianqiu was overjoyed. The two of them immediately ran into the wilderness and caught a few wild beasts to experiment. Sure enough, the effect was miraculous. Yu Qianqiu was so happy that he exclaimed that the man was a talent. In the end, he accidentally put the man into his own space. The two ends of the pipe had small holes sealed with wax, and there was a fuse halfway up the waist. Yu Qianqiu took out a flint and lit the fuse. The fuse dragged sparks as it drilled into the pipe. Then, the pipe made a light pop sound, and he felt a slight warmth in his hand. Yu Qianqiu nodded with satisfaction. He took it to the corridor and looked around to see that there was no one around. Then, he gently touched the door of Lu Zhenguang's room and listened carefully to see if there was any movement inside. He unscrewed the wax seal on the two ends of the pipe and gently inserted one end into the crack of the door. He put the other end in his mouth and gently blew. Inside the room, Lu Zhenguang was sitting cross-legged in meditation. With his cultivation, he had actually heard a little movement outside the door. He concentrated and didn't find anyone, so he didn't care. This was mainly because he was arrogant and had never suffered a loss in the cultivation world. Moreover, he had never heard of anyone from the righteous and devil Dao daring to cause trouble in the 100 Flowers Valley. A wisp of green smoke slowly floated out from the crack of the door and gradually filled the whole room. Sitting cross-legged, Lu Zhenguang's nose slightly moved, and he secretly wondered what was so fragrant. Then, he felt that the genuine qi in his body became heavy and slowed down. He frowned and opened his eyes to see the room filled with green smoke. Even though Lu Zhenguang didn't have any experience at this time, he also found that he had been tricked. He was shocked and just got up from the bed. He suddenly felt dizzy. He opened his mouth to shout, but before he could shout, his eyes suddenly went black, and he fell to the ground with a bang. Yu Qianqiu had been guarding outside. He was not worried at all. Anyway, if he was discovered, he could hide in the golden bead. Hearing the sound of someone falling to the ground inside, he secretly said that he had succeeded. He put his palm on the door and exerted a little force. The bolt inside popped open. With his current level of cultivation, opening a door was a piece of cake. Moreover, in the cultivation world, this kind of door was just for show. Even if the door was bolted like this, it wouldn't be able to stop anyone. Only the sound of the bolt opening could alert the person inside. However, the person inside had already fainted. Pushing the door open, Yu Qianqiu quickly went inside. When he saw Lu Zhenguang lying on the ground, he closed the door again. He walked straight over, and without saying a word, lifted his leg and kicked the person lying on the ground. Feeling his unvented fire, he kicked a few more times, cursing as he kicked. "How dare you flirt with my girl? You're courting death." After feeling a little better, he took off the storage pouch on Lu Zhenguang's waist and opened it. He released his divine sense to investigate. Sure enough, he found a jade archive that was exactly the same as the one Chu Ping'er had described. When he used his divine sense to investigate the jade archive, he found that the layers of restrictions inside were completely undetectable. Only the first layer was unlocked. He reckoned that it was the layer that Lu Changqing had unlocked. There was a whole bunch of strange medicinal names. Yu Qianqiu had never heard of any of them before. He couldn't tell whether the jade archive was real or fake. After storing the storage pouch into his dimensional space, he immediately searched around the room. He didn't even let go of the bedding on the bed. After confirming that there was nothing else hidden, he stripped off Lu Zhenguang's clothes and carefully examined them piece by piece. However, he didn't find anything. "This guy has soft skin and tender flesh. No wonder he dared to seduce my girl," Yu Qianqiu muttered as he looked at the naked Lu Zhenguang on the ground. If it weren't for the fact that he was afraid of bringing trouble to Chu Ping'er, he would have killed Lu Zhenguang right there and then. However, he was unwilling to do so. His gaze fell on Lu Zhenguang's genitals. Yu Qianqiu rubbed his nose and sneered. He glanced at the sword hanging by the bed and walked over to pull it out. He circled around the naked man on the ground and swung the sword in his hand at the genitals of Lu Jingguang's thighs. Blood splattered everywhere. Pinger, I really don't trust this kind of person. I had no choice but to castrate him, Yu Qianqiu sighed. When he mentioned Chu Ping, his brows furrowed again. Lu Jingguang had only told Chu Ping, about the pill formula. Now that it had been stolen, and he had been castrated, the first person the Lu family's grandfather and grandson would suspect would be Chu Ping. This wouldn't do. Looking at Lu Jingguang's lower body bleeding all over the ground, Yu Qianqiu's tightly furrowed brows relaxed. He smiled lightly and took a brush from the brush rack on the side. He dipped it in the blood on the ground and scribbled a few lines of words on the wall. Lu Chongqing, I will take revenge for the extermination of my family in the future. I met your grandson by chance, so I will collect some interest first. After doing this, Yu Qianqiu walked out unhurriedly and closed the door. When he passed by Chu Pinger's room, he resisted the urge to go in again. He walked out of the 100 Flowers house and went straight to the shops around the square. He had seen the shops of Fuxian Island when he was strolling around during the day, so he naturally had to go there now. When he walked into the market, he thought about how he didn't know when he would be able to come back again. So he looked at the items on the stalls as he walked. As long as he found something useful, he directly bought it and threw it into his storage bag. He didn't even care about the price. Chapter 43. Daoist friend, what do you want to buy? Our shop's magic tools and pills are famous in the cultivation world. Let me take a look first. Yu Qianqiu looked at the items on the shelves. Just as the shopkeeper said, Fuxian Island's shop should mainly sell magic tools and pills. After looking for a while, Yu Qianqiu asked the shopkeeper, Shopkeeper, are you in charge of this shop? The shopkeeper was stunned and didn't know why he asked that. He smiled and said, My sex elder is in charge here, but I can still make the decisions. Daoist friend, what do you want to buy? Yu Qianqiu smiled and said, I want to see your elder. Seeing that the shopkeeper was still hesitating, he added, I have something important to see your elder. While the shopkeeper was still muttering, a young man and woman with extraordinary looks came out of the house. Behind them was an old man. The shopkeeper smiled and greeted, Young palace master, young lady. The young man and woman nodded. Which family's young palace master and young lady are they? Yu Qianqiu looked at the young man and woman. The young man had an extraordinary presence, and the young lady was very beautiful, not inferior to Chu Pinger. Yu Qianqiu couldn't help but take a few more glances. The young man and woman glanced at Yu Qianqiu and didn't mind. Yu Qianqiu's appearance really didn't attract much attention. The young man and woman walked to the door and bowed to the old man behind them. Marshal uncle, please stay. The old man nodded and said, Go back and send my regards to your mother. The young man and woman said a few polite words and turned to leave. The old man also turned and walked into the house. Elder Qin. The shopkeeper shouted and walked to the old man. He said respectfully, Elder, this Daoist friend said he has something important to talk to you about. He pointed at Yu Qianqiu. Oh. The old man turned around to look at Yu Qianqiu. He sized him up and asked in confusion, Is there something you need from me, little brother? Yu Qianqiu didn't dare to put on any airs now. He hurriedly bowed and imitated the shopkeeper's greeting, Elder Qin. He then took out the immortal supporting token from his storage bag and handed it over. When Elder Qin saw what Yu Qianqiu took out, his eyelids twitched. He took it and examined it. He knew it was real and immediately said, Come with me. Yu Qianqiu respectfully followed him into the inner room. The shopkeeper also saw that item. As he looked at the two of them, he muttered, Is that an immortal supporting token? It's been a long time since I've heard of an outsider holding this thing. At daybreak, Yu Qianqiu followed a person out of the 100 Flowers Valley. This person was Elder Qin's disciple. His name was Chengdingqing. He was in charge of transporting things between supporting Immortal Island and the 100 Flowers Valley. Today, he was ordered by his master to bring Yu Qianqiu back to supporting Immortal Island. The two of them walked out of the 100 Flowers Valley's grand formation. Chengdingqing took out a small copper crane and threw it into the air after making a few hand seals. The copper crane grew with the wind and instantly turned into a big, lively immortal crane. It circled in the sky and slowly landed in front of the two of them. Cheng Dingqing jumped onto the crane's back and looked at Yu Qianqiu. He smiled and said, "Come on up." Yu Qianqiu immediately jumped on. The former made a hand seal and shouted, "Rise!" The big crane cried and flew into the sky. Yu Qianqiu wasn't paying attention and was almost thrown down. The crane circled twice and found the right direction to fly south. The speed of the crane was very fast. When people stood on it, the wind resistance was very strong. It almost blew them off. However, no matter how bad Yu Qianqiu's cultivation was, he could still stand steadily when he circulated his power. Cheng Dingqing saw Yu Qianqiu's embarrassment and couldn't help but smile. He asked, "Is this your first time riding a flying magic tool?" "Yes, I've never ridden it before." Yu Qianqiu didn't know how to address him, so he could only answer directly. Cheng Dingqing seemed to know what he was thinking and said, "Since you came with the supporting immortal token, you will be a disciple of the same sect in the future. Our supporting immortal island isn't like other sects where there are generations of disciples. Seniority is determined by strength. Chi refining cultivators call foundation establishment cultivators martial uncles, and so on. I'm a core formation cultivator, but I can't see through your cultivation. I wonder what stage your cultivation is at. Why didn't this damn Guan Yu tell me before?" Yu Qianqiu smiled bitterly. "I'm Chi refining level 10, so I have to call you Martial Ancestor Cheng." He didn't expect that his seniority in Ong Kwangsung was so high, but now he was someone else's disciple. "You don't have to be embarrassed. This is a very normal thing in our supporting immortal island. Maybe I'm your martial ancestor today, but in 2 years, I might have to call you martial uncle." Cheng Dingqing smiled. "Martial ancestor Cheng must be joking. How is that possible?" Yu Qianqiu replied. Cheng Dingqing was also a person who was easy to talk to. The two of them chatted and laughed along the way. In his previous life, Yu Qianqiu took a plane and flew in the sky. However, anyone with a normal body could sit on a plane. People who didn't cultivate really couldn't sit on a plane. If you didn't sit in the cabin, you would know what it felt like to stand outside the plane. However, there were benefits too. The great rivers and mountains below could be seen clearly from the top. After flying for more than half a day, they couldn't see the land below. It was all vast ocean. Yu Qianqiu knew that they were about to reach supporting Immortal Island. As expected, not long later, an island appeared on the surface of the ocean. The island was surrounded by clouds and mist. Cheng Dingqing smiled. Supporting Immortal Island is in front. When they flew closer, they realized that it looked like a small island from afar. However, when they looked closer, they couldn't tell how big it was. The red-crowned crane descended and its speed slowed down. When it was about to land, Cheng Dingqing sent out a finger seal from the depths of the clouds. The clouds opened up a path for the red-crowned crane to carry the two of them in. After passing through the clouds, Yu Qianqiu looked back. He couldn't help but click his tongue in wonder. From the outside, it looked like there were clouds, but from the inside, there was nothing. It seemed like this was a formation to protect the island. Looking down, the pavilions and terraces really gave off the feeling of a paradise on earth. As expected of the number one sect of the righteous path, the grandeur of these buildings was much stronger than that of Ong Kwangsung. The red-crowned crane landed on a plaza. The two of them jumped down. Cheng Dingqing invoked his arts to keep the red-crowned crane. He said, "Follow me." After saying that, he led Yu Qianqiu to the huge building in front of the plaza. Along the way, they met many people who greeted Cheng Dingqing. Yu Qianqiu saw a huge building with 3 floors from afar. On the board of the first floor, there were 3 golden words Prenglai Pavilion. After Cheng Dingqing spoke to the guard at the door, he brought him into the building. Once he entered, Yu Qianqiu almost fainted. It was like entering a government office building in his previous life. Even though it was an ancient building, there was an empty main hall in the middle of the first floor. On both sides, there were many smaller halls. The smaller halls also had small signs hanging on them. For example, the service office, the defense office, the secular affairs office, the miscellaneous office. The signs in the corridors on both sides were unclear. He didn't know what was written on them, but it must be somewhere else. Yu Qianqiu shook his head. If it wasn't for this antique building, he would really suspect that he had traveled back in time. He followed Cheng Gingqing to the top floor of the third floor and stopped in front of what seemed to be the largest room. Cheng Gingqing shouted from outside, "Disciple Cheng Gingqing requests an audience with the sect master." Yu Qianqiu raised his head and looked at the sign hanging above. Sure enough, it was the word sect master. He really suspected that the guy who made these things was also a time traveler. "Come in." A majestic voice came from inside. This feeling was too King familiar. Yu Qianqiu felt his teeth aching. He secretly muttered, "I wonder what rank the sect master is. Governor? Mayor? Or county head?" Cheng Gingqing pulled him, who was in a daze. Chapter 44. The sect master of the supporting immortal island, Feng Xiangtian, had already reached the middle stage of the tribulation. He had been in charge of the righteous Tao's number 1 sect, the supporting immortal island, for more than 100 years. At this moment, he was sitting upright in the sect master's room on the top floor of Penglai Pavilion. Accompanying him were a few elders of supporting immortal island. The few of them were quite worried about the current situation of the cultivation world. Ong Kwangsung had consecutively eradicated several demonic sects within a year, completely breaking the balance between the righteous and demonic sects that had been maintained for hundreds of years. His strong rise had stirred up the entire cultivation world into a state of unrest. Some of the weaker righteous sects had been repeatedly attacked by the demonic sects, and more people from the righteous and demonic sects were involved. It seems that chaos in the correction world is unavoidable. Although my supporting immortal island is the number 1 sect of the righteous Tao, I'm afraid that we will also be implicated. We need to prepare early. Elder Fei, Elder Guan and Elder Huang, the 3 of you are in charge of the 10,000 Fragrance Garden, the Alchemy Pavilion, and the Smithing Pavilion. It is very important for our sect to deal with this calamity. All kinds of elixirs and magic tools must be prepared. Once the chaos implicates our supporting immortal island, we must not tarnish our reputation as the number 1 sect of the righteous path. I reckon that after the chaos, the entire cultivation world will be ranked again according to strength. Our sect's reputation as the number 1 sect of the righteous path has been maintained for more than 1,000 years. We will not allow it to be destroyed in our generation. Feng Xiangtian had a dignified appearance to begin with. When he spoke, his eyes shone brightly as he glanced at the 3 elders. "We will do our best," the 3 elders said in unison. However, when Elder Fei, who was in charge of the Myriad Fragrance Garden, said this, she seemed to lack confidence. Feng Xiangtian looked at him and asked, "Elder Fei, do you have any difficulties? If there is, then don't say it now. This matter concerns the rise and fall of the sect, and we absolutely cannot be careless. Otherwise, if anything goes wrong, we will become the eternal sinners of the sect." Elder Fei looked at the 2 elders beside him and said with a bitter smile, "There are indeed difficulties." It was true that the 10,000 Fragrance Garden was the largest spiritual herb garden in the world, but there weren't many spiritual herbs that could be used to refine high-quality pills. Not only did good spiritual herbs grow slowly, but it was also harder for them to survive. Once Elder Guan's Alchemy Pavilion increases its consumption, I'm afraid that it will really not be able to make ends meet. As soon as he finished speaking, Elder Guan, who reeked of medicine, stood up and shouted, "Fei, what do you mean by that? Could it be that you want my Alchemy Pavilion to reduce the amount of spirit grass used? Don't even think about it." Elder Fei did not get angry even after being rebutted by Elder Guan. He only smiled bitterly and shook his head. Elder Guan's temper was famous in supporting Immortal Island. He didn't care about anything else and only liked to concoct pills. If someone dared to obstruct him from concocting pills, he would fight them to the death. There was no one in supporting Immortal Island who wasn't afraid of him. In the entire cultivation world, he had the title of Pill Fanatic. His alchemy skills were probably second to none. Elder Fei, who knew his temper well, did not dare to say anything else. "How about this?" Feng Xiangtian said. "Send more disciples to search for spiritual herbs. Send more people to the Myriad Fragrance Garden, as well to increase the production of spiritual herbs. The sect will stop selling elixirs that are intermediate grade and above. First, ensure the elixirs in the supporting Immortal Islands inventory. In addition, I have already notified Elder Quan, who is in charge of the sect's supplies, to increase the amount of spirit stones used by all disciples below the core formation stage by 5 times, and the amount of chi storage pills used by all disciples above the core formation stage by 1 time. Elder Jean, who is in charge of the spirit stone mine, will increase the amount of spirit stones extracted. Elder Qin, who is in charge of the common goods, will send back the spirit stones obtained from the outside. The elders nodded. At this moment, they heard the sound of 2 people coming up the stairs. Someone shouted from outside, "Disciple Cheng Gengqing is here to see the sect leader." Everyone had an impression of Cheng Gengqing. He was the capable disciple of Elder Qin, who was in charge of the common goods. However, they did not know why he came to see the sect leader. Did something happen outside? Feng Xiangtian frowned and shouted, "Come in." They saw Cheng Gengqing leading an ordinary-looking man in. The sect leader and the 3 elders looked at him. From his clothes, they could tell that he wasn't a disciple of supporting Immortal Island. What was even stranger was that they couldn't see any cultivation from him. This person was, of course, Yu Qianqiu. Disciple Cheng Gengqing greets the sect leader and the 3 elders. Cheng Gengqing bowed. Yu Qianqiu also bowed. Itinerant cultivator Yu Qianqiu greets the sect leader and the 3 elders. Cheng Gengqing, why are you looking for me? Feng Xiangtian said, but his eyes were still sizing up Yu Qianqiu. When he heard Yu Qianqiu say that he was a rogue cultivator, he almost thought that he was mistaken. The other 3 elders also showed the same doubts. Cheng Gengqing reached out to touch the storage bag hanging on his waist and said respectfully, reporting to Sect Master, "Disciple is bringing the spirit stones back to the island, and I was ordered by Master to bring Yu Qianqiu to see Sect Master." "Your master asked you to bring him?" Feng Xiangtian asked curiously. Cheng Gengqing quickly took out the supporting immortal token and told them the purpose of Yu Qianqiu's visit. After listening to him, Feng Xiangtian and the 3 elders looked at each other in dismay. The supporting immortal token was a token that could only be obtained by those who held the position of an elder and above. It was used to show one's identity and to give the descendants of the token a chance to join the island. This rule had been established for thousands of years, and Yu Qianqiu was the 3rd person to come with the token. There were originally 300 special tokens on the island. It was said that one would know a secret if they collected all 300 tokens. No one knew what the secret was, but it became a symbol of identity for those who held the position of an elder and above. As time passed, they were distributed one by one. Due to various reasons, there were less than half of the tokens left on the supporting Immortal Island. That was where the trouble came. Some people, be it in terms of cultivation, qualifications, or contributions, were qualified to assume the position of an elder. However, after assuming the position of an elder, they didn't have a token that represented their status as an elder. Originally, the rule was that only the descendants of the token holders could join the supporting Immortal Island. Later on, because the number of tokens had dwindled, it was changed to only recognizing the token holders and not the descendants. They were hoping that someone would give the token to them. Now that Yu Qianqiu had brought this token, it would undoubtedly reduce the awkward situation of an elder being in an unjustifiable position. Feng Xiangtian took the token from Cheng Gengqing's hand, and after checking it carefully, he nodded slightly at the 3 elders to show that it was the real supporting immortal token. The 3 elders couldn't hide their fiery gazes. The 3 of them were the ones who held the position of an elder, but didn't have a token. Actually, it wasn't just the 3 of them who didn't have a token. When Feng Xiangtian saw the expressions of the 3 elders, his heart skipped a beat, and he had a headache. This wasn't good, as something like this hadn't happened for hundreds of years. This token had to appear when he was in charge of the supporting Immortal Island. The entire supporting Immortal Island had over 200 elders, and there were over 50 elders who didn't have a token. If this token was given to any elder, it would definitely offend the other 50 elders, and he would have to suffer in the future. Don't think that this was just a small supporting immortal token. It might cause a huge commotion. To put it bluntly, It might even cause him to be kicked out of his position. That would be the first time in the history of the supporting Immortal Island to be kicked out of his position due to unfairness. Brother, what are you trying to do? Aren't you harming others by bringing this thing here? Thinking about this, Feng Xiangtian looked at Yu Qianqiu and didn't know what to say. Yu Qianqiu didn't know how much trouble he had brought to the #1 sect master of the righteous path. When he saw Feng Xiangtian looking at him with malicious intent, his heart skipped a beat, and he thought to himself, damn, is this old fart going back on his words? Chapter 45. Feng Xiangtian's face was gloomy. His gaze swept between the three elders and Yu Qianqiu from time to time. No one spoke in the room. The atmosphere suddenly became strange. Cheng Dingqing panicked. Beads of sweat appeared on his forehead. Did I do something wrong? Damn it! What are you doing? It's been almost an hour. If you don't want to accept me, just say it. Do you think I'm afraid of you? Yu Qianqiu, who was standing there respectfully, was a little angry. He straightened his back. His action made Feng Xiangtian's eyes light up. He thought to himself, whoever started the trouble should untie it. The trouble was caused by this kid. It's up to him to solve it. Thinking about this, he smiled and coughed. He said to Yu Qianqiu, "You're Yu Qianqiu, right? That's a good name. Since you brought our sect's immortal supporting token, we will agree to accept you. From now on, you're a disciple of our supporting Immortal Island. What's your cultivation level now? Tell me." Yu Qianqiu was overjoyed. He bowed and said, "Thank you, sect leader, for accepting me. Disciple Yu Qianqiu is very grateful. Disciple's cultivation level is low. I've only reached level 10 Qi refinement." The four elders in the room stiffened. Feng Xiangtian, who couldn't see that Yu Qianqiu was only level 10 Qi refinement, with his tribulation middle stage cultivation level. He couldn't help but feel embarrassed. Level 10 Qi refinement. Feng Xiangtian murmured. This was a little different from his original plan, but it was better this way. He frowned and said, "Yu Qianqiu, there are some things I have to tell you. Although this token can let you join the supporting Immortal Island, our sect's rule is that those who fail to reach Foundation Establishment 3 times will be expelled. You haven't reached Foundation Establishment yet, so you have to follow this rule. Think about it carefully. If you regret, you can still take back this immortal supporting token and join our sect after you break through to the Foundation Establishment stage." What Feng Xiangtian said was the truth, but there was also an element of intimidation in his words. His intention was to make Yu Qianqiu back off in the face of difficulties, throw the hot immortal supporting medallion back, and enjoy the peace and quiet. When the three elders heard Feng Xiangtian's words, their expressions changed, but they had no reason to stop him. They all stared at Yu Qianqiu to see his reaction. As expected, the latter didn't disappoint them. Yu Qianqiu had already heard about these rules from Guan Yu, so he had thought about it very clearly. He immediately shook his head and said, "It's my lifelong dream to be able to join the #1 righteous sect, supporting Immortal Island. Since I'm already here, I won't regret it." "That's good." Feng Xiangtian nodded and said, "Immortal Yu Qianqiu, that token. When a sect elder selects you as a disciple, you can hand over the token to that elder." After saying that, he spread out his palm, and the token slowly flew to Yu Qianqiu. After Yu Qianqiu received the token, he said, "Cheng Dingqing, take him to register and find a place to stay." Cheng Dingqing agreed, and Yu Qianqiu also thanked him. The two of them left the sect master's room. Inside the room, everyone was silent for a while. Then Elder Huang suddenly said, "Sect master, I don't think we need to trouble the other elders. Why don't we let this kid join our pavilion of refining as an assistant?" "That's not appropriate." Elder Fei smiled. Elder Huang, sect master, also said that Wanfen Garden needs to increase the production of spiritual herbs. "I think this kid is quite suitable. Let's let him join our Wanfen Garden." *T. Elder Guan from the pavilion of refining elixir scolded. He stood up and glared at the other two elders. "You two old things, don't give me that. Don't think I don't know what you're up to. There's only one token. If anyone wants it, it'll depend on their own ability. Otherwise, I'll be the first to object." Sect master, I'll take my leave." He turned and left. Elder Fei and Elder Huang looked at each other. They knew they couldn't afford to offend him, so they didn't say anything. After Elder Guan left, they seemed to remember something, and immediately stood up to bid farewell to the sect master. Everyone in the sect master's room left in an instant. Seeing that he was the only one left, Feng Xiangtian heaved a sigh of relief. If he hadn't thought of this method, he would have been in deep trouble. Just the 3 elders were already enough to cause a ruckus. And if the 50 elders were to come at him at the same time, no, he had to inform the others as well, or else it would be troublesome. Thinking of this, Feng Xiangtian took out a piece of jade and made a finger sign on it. After muttering a few words, he crushed it in his hand and let out a sigh of relief. After Yu Qianqiu and Cheng Gengqing went downstairs, Cheng Gengqing wiped the sweat off his forehead and said, "Yu Qianqiu, you're the first person the sect master has talked so much to a qi condensation disciple. I'm also benefiting from it. After I hand over the spirit stones, I'll bring you to the registration." Yu Qianqiu didn't have any objections. He accompanied Cheng Gengqing to quickly count and hand over the spirit stones. After that, the 2 of them went to the registration area for the new disciples. Because it was the sect master's decree, things went smoothly. After walking out of Penglai Pavilion, Cheng Gengqing smiled and said, "Yu Qianqiu, congratulations. From today onwards, you're a disciple of Fuxian Island." "It's been hard on you, Grand Master Cheng," Yu Qianqiu said with a bit of sincere gratitude. As a newcomer who had just arrived, and in this cold cultivation world, it was indeed a very rare thing to meet someone who spoke to you in a pleasant manner. "It's just a convenience. You're welcome." Cheng Gengqing waved his hand and suddenly frowned. "You haven't found a master yet. I'm afraid you won't have a place to stay for the time being. Why don't you stay at my place first? You can leave with your master after we decide on an elder to be your master." Yu Qianqiu thought about it and agreed. Moreover, it was indeed more convenient to follow an acquaintance. Just as he was about to nod and agree, he suddenly heard someone laughing behind him. "Then you might as well worship me as your master. You can stay at my alchemy pavilion." Yu Qianqiu turned around and saw that it was one of the elders he met just now. Before he could react, he heard Cheng Gengqing greet him. "Elder Guan." Yu Qianqiu could only greet him. "Haha. No need to be so courteous. No need to be so courteous." Elder Guan clasped his hands behind his back and stared at Yu Qianqiu with a smile. He walked around him twice as if he was looking at a treasure. The latter shuddered under his stare. He only knew that Elder Guan was an elder, but did not know what he did. In addition to the smell of medicine, Yu Qianqiu could not help but think of those medical freaks who liked to experiment on human bodies. Elder Guan stopped walking around and put on a kind expression. "Yu Qianqiu, is this how you want me to be your master?" Yu Qianqiu did not know how to answer. He felt that something was not right. An elder of the number 1 righteous sect, Fuxian Island, was rushing to be his master? Then, he looked at Cheng Gengqing's slightly surprised expression. There was a problem. There was definitely a problem. Haha. A hearty laughter was heard. Yu Qianqiu turned around and saw the other 2 elders walking towards him. Cheng Gengqing bowed again. "Elder Fei, Elder Huang." Yu Qianqiu had no choice but to bow as well. "Haha." The 2 elders laughed and said in unison, "No need to be so polite." Elder Fei looked at Yu Qianqiu with a smile and said, "Yu Qianqiu, you should be my disciple." "Yu Qianqiu, I have the same intention. Follow me." Elder Huang said. Yu Qianqiu and Cheng Gengqing were stunned at the same time. Elder Guan's face turned from sunny to gloomy. He looked terrible. Chapter 46. Who is Yu Qianqiu? A silhouette descended from the sky and landed in front of them. The newcomer's gaze swept across them before finally landing on Yu Qianqiu, who was dressed differently from the rest. He asked, "You are Yu Qianqiu?" Yu Qianqiu nodded. Before he could say anything, the person said impatiently, "Come with me. I will take you as my disciple." Bullshit. Elder Guan stood in front of Yu Qianqiu. Elder Fei and Elder Huang also stood in front of the person. Elder Fei chuckled and said, "Elder Lu, when did you learn to rob?" Cheng Gengqing and Yu Qianqiu were dumbfounded. They didn't know what these people were trying to do. Elder Lu, who had just arrived, said disapprovingly, "Old Fei, what are you saying? Yu Qianqiu hasn't acknowledged anyone as his master yet. He will naturally follow whoever he wishes to acknowledge as his master. How am I a robber?" Haha, I like what Elder Lu said. Another silhouette landed in front of the crowd. Before the newcomer could steady himself, he saw dozens of silhouettes descending from all directions. People kept asking, "Who is Yu Qianqiu?" It was obvious that the group of elders were here for Yu Qianqiu. Cheng Yingqing looked at Yu Qianqiu suspiciously. He really couldn't see what was so good about him, that so many elders were fighting for him. However, he didn't know that Yu Qianqiu shuddered. He thought of a fairy tale in his previous life. There was a monk named Tang Sung. It was said that eating his meat could make one immortal. Could it be that my meat has the same effect? Yu Qianqiu's divine sense immediately locked on the golden pearl in his dantian. If he found anything wrong, he would leave immediately. The window of the sect leader's room, on the third floor of Penglai Pavilion, was open. Sect leader Feng Xiangtian looked at the group of elders below, and shook his head with a wry smile. Once again, he felt that he had made the wisest decision. When the surrounding disciples saw so many elders gathered together, they didn't know what was going on. They wanted to go over and take a look, but they didn't dare to. Not long after, there was a large crowd of disciples surrounding them, and there were even more who heard the commotion and came over to watch. No matter how courageous Yu Qianqiu was, he couldn't help but sweat beads on his forehead when being stared at by a group of old fellows who had lived for at least 200 years. This kind of pressure was too great. Yu Qianqiu felt his throat was a little dry. He swallowed his saliva and bowed to everyone. "Disciple Yu Qianqiu greets the elders." "There's no need to be so polite." The elders replied one after another. Everyone's tone was as if they were Yu Qianqiu's master. Yu Qianqiu smiled awkwardly at everyone. "Oh my God! What kind of background does this Yu Qianqiu have? So many elders have to give him face." Cheng Yingqing also felt the huge pressure. He couldn't help but wipe the beads of sweat off his forehead. He looked around and realized that he was surrounded by elders. There was no way out even if he wanted to. All the elders had gathered, and everyone was well aware of what each of them was thinking. Everyone was silent for a moment. Elder Lu, who had just arrived, swept his gaze across everyone and said in a deep voice, "Everyone standing here isn't a solution. There is only one immortal supporting token. The sect leader has said that whoever accepts Yu Qianqiu as a disciple will be qualified to receive the immortal supporting token. Since the sect leader has said so, we will naturally comply. Now, it seems like all the elders want to accept Yu Qianqiu as a disciple. However, there is only one Yu Qianqiu and one immortal supporting token. We can't possibly fight over it. Don't dawdle. If you have something to say, say it." Elder Guan said impatiently. Elder Lu rolled his eyes. Just as he wanted to retort, he realized that not many people could afford to offend this crazy old man. Who knew when he would have to ask him to concoct pills for him? He could only shut his mouth. If it was someone else, he would definitely say, "If you don't want to wait, you can leave first. No one is stopping you here." Damn it. That scared me. So they are all here for the immortal supporting token in my hands. Yu Qianqiu finally heaved a sigh of relief. Cheng Yingqing also understood that his master Elder Qin had an immortal supporting token. It was no wonder that Elder Qin had asked him to send Yu Qianqiu to Immortal Supporting Island. If his master didn't have it, he would have gotten it first. Then, Yu Qianqiu wouldn't have called him Ancestor Master. He would have called him Senior Brother. Cheng Yingqing finally understood why his master had smiled so strangely. He knew that there would be a show to watch. "Elder Lu, we are all from the same sect. It would be a joke if we fought over a token. If you have any ideas, just say them. Everyone, let's hear it and see if it works." One of the elders said. "That's right. Elder Lu, why don't you say it first?" Many of the elders agreed. Elder Lu looked at Elder Guan with a pleased expression. Unfortunately, Elder Guan only rolled his eyes at him. He could only smile and say, "Actually, it's very simple. Let Yu Qianqiu choose. He can follow whoever he wants to be his disciple. The immortal support token will naturally belong to that person." What do all the elders think about this? If you agree, why don't you all be witnesses in case someone goes back on his words? When he said the last sentence, his eyes were fixed on Elder Guan. The meaning behind his words was clear. Elder Guan glared back and patted his chest. Whoever goes back on his words is a grandson. All the elders felt that this was a good idea. Let's not fight over it. Let Yu Qianqiu choose himself. Whoever he chooses will be lucky. Hence they all agreed. In an instant, the tense atmosphere disappeared. Everyone's eyes were fixed on Yu Qianqiu. Elder Lu said to him, Yu Qianqiu, you heard everyone's words. You can find whoever you think is suitable to be your master. No one is forcing you. Don't worry and don't be afraid. Cheng Gingqing glanced at the fiery gazes around him. He looked at Yu Qianqiu with sympathy. He thought to himself that no one was easy to choose. This matter offended too many people. And not just any ordinary person, but all the elders. TSK, what's there to be afraid of? Yu Qianqiu, who was bowing respectfully to the elders, gradually straightened his back. He glanced at the sect leader at the window on the third floor of the Penglai Pavilion. Now he understood why the sect leader tried so hard to return the fairy supporting token to him. He knew that there would be trouble. The elders looked at him with kindness, dignity, and love. In short, all of their gazes conveyed the same message. I am the master you should choose. Yu Qianqiu felt his scalp tingling. Elder Guan's eyes were clearly threatening him. It was as if he was telling him, young man, if you don't choose me as your master, I will teach you a lesson. What is going on? I am new here. I can't afford to offend any of them. Yu Qianqiu looked at the sect leader at the window again. Feng Xiangtian seemed to have seen his pleading eyes. He disappeared behind the window and muttered with a bitter smile. Young man, don't blame me. It is better for you to offend them than me. Damn. Why did I go in the opposite direction? They are begging me. Why should I be afraid? Yu Qianqiu suddenly realized what was going on when he saw the expectation hidden in the elders' expressions. Chapter 47. Thinking about this, he nervously said, This disciple has just arrived and doesn't know much about the elders. How about? The elders' eyes lit up, but they didn't hear anything else. Elder Lu smiled and said, Just say what you want to say, no one will blame you. When he said this, his smile was very kind. Yu Qianqiu saw that the elders nodded, so he put on an awkward expression and said hesitantly, I don't know what abilities the elders have, but I want to pick one that suits me. As he said this, his voice became very low. As soon as he said that, the elders who had gathered together immediately became lively and introduced their own abilities one after another. A group of disciples gathered outside didn't know what the elders were doing. It felt like they were selling things in a market. The disciples all looked at each other. This elder's cultivation has reached the early stage of tribulation passing. It's not a problem for me to be the master of a little child like you. There are a few who haven't reached tribulation passing. It would be a pity if I don't find a disciple to inherit my extraordinary spells. How many people below the nascent soul stage can use that spell of yours? Yu Qianqiu, come to my refining pavilion. I'll refine a few high-quality magic tools for you to defend yourself. It'll be very worth it. Yu Qianqiu appeared to be very respectful on the surface, but when he heard the elders boasting without regard for their status, his heart was filled with joy. These elders might be famous people in the cultivation world, but when they were gathered together, they were no different from mortals. This was probably the case of rare things being expensive. If there were too many of them, they would naturally depreciate. After listening respectfully for a long time, he didn't find many people with special abilities. Everyone talked about how high their cultivation was, how powerful their magic treasures were, and how many demonic cultivators they had killed. But this wasn't what he wanted. No matter how high their cultivation was, it didn't matter to him. Cultivation couldn't be transferred to him. So what if a magic treasure was powerful? He didn't even have the strength to fly on a sword. Even if a magic treasure was given to him, he wouldn't be able to use it. And those people who were proud of killing people were simply perverts. Don't they know that what I want the most is someone who can help me reach foundation establishment? Speaking up to here, Yu Qianqiu himself was not very clear. At present, in the cultivation world, there was probably no one who would dare to say that they would be able to help someone successfully reach the foundation building realm. At best, They could only say that they would give you a few foundation-building pills, or give you some guidance during the foundation-building realm, or provide you with some foundation-building experience. Furthermore, the conditions of Fuxian Island's disciples were much better than those of other sections. Although foundation establishment pills were quite precious, every disciple had 3 chances to reach foundation establishment. On the contrary, it was harsher than other sections. Those who failed 3 times would definitely be chased out of the supporting immortal island, because such disciples had almost no future in terms of cultivation. Therefore, there was no elder who dared to say that they would definitely help you reach foundation establishment. As long as someone dared to say that, they would immediately be ridiculed by others. No matter how he listened, only the words of the 3 elders, Fei, Guan, and Huang, that he had seen in the sect master's room, moved Yu Qianqiu a little. Elder Fei was in charge of the myriad fragrance garden. Some of the spiritual herbs in the garden were priceless treasures. If Elder Fei were to become his disciple, he would be able to obtain the spiritual herbs on the pill recipe Jade Archive. Elder Guan was in charge of the elixir refinery pavilion, which could refine all kinds of medicinal pills. What attracted Yu Qianqiu the most was that almost all the foundation establishment pills in the new Excellence Assembly were refined by Elder Guan's elixir refinery pavilion. Elder Huang's elixir refinery pavilion was famous throughout the cultivation world. The transcendent artifacts refined by them were even heard of in Angquangsung. A good transcendent artifact was no less valuable than a cultivator's life. Yu Qianqiu had personally witnessed the might of transcendent artifacts in the Spirit Stone mine in Angquangsung. It was much more powerful than when he used a saber to slash people. He was still shocked to this day. He had already preliminarily determined that the master he wanted to choose would be one of these 3. However, in order to survive in the cultivation world in the future, he had no choice but to consider it carefully. The biggest obstacle he was currently facing was breaking through to the foundation establishment stage. If he couldn't break through to the foundation establishment stage, everything else was just empty talk. Although there were many spiritual herbs in Elder Fei's myriad fragrance garden, he didn't know how to refine pills. What was the point of becoming his disciple? Did he have to eat spiritual herbs like rice? Or steal spiritual herbs to exchange for money? The lifespan of a qi refining stage cultivator wasn't that long. If he died, would they all become his inheritance? Even if they were to become his inheritance, he should at least have a purpose. If he couldn't break through to the foundation establishment stage, what was the point of having so many spiritual herbs and so much money? If he had already reached the foundation establishment stage, Elder Huang's elixir refinery pavilion would be a good choice. It would be great if he could obtain a few more transcendent artifacts. However, it was a little unrealistic to go there now. He couldn't use the transcendent artifacts anyway. No matter how many he obtained, they would only become his inheritance. It seemed that Elder Guan was the best choice, as long as he learned the skill of refining pills. Even if he failed to build his foundation and was chased out of Fuxian Island, he would still have this skill to rely on. At most, he could slowly gather spiritual herbs in the future and refine his own damn foundation establishment pills. He didn't believe that eating foundation establishment pills like rice could not help him break through to the foundation establishment stage. Moreover, looking at this old fellow's arrogant appearance, it seemed that everyone was a little afraid of him. From this point, it could be seen that refining pills was a good profession. Secondly, he wouldn't have to be afraid of offending others if he became his disciple. The old fellow's arrogant appearance should be able to support him. Moreover, he had a straightforward temper, so it shouldn't be difficult to deal with him. Thinking of this, Yu Qianqiu made up his mind. He turned a deaf ear to the buzzing of the elders. His expression was resolute, and his resolute gaze landed on Elder Guan, who was spitting saliva at the other elders. Everyone noticed Yu Qianqiu's reaction and knew that he was about to make a choice. They all stopped talking. Some of the elders even revealed expressions of anticipation. All of this is King Bulsh T. Standing in front of Yu Qianqiu with his back facing him, Elder Guan was cursing to his heart's content. Suddenly, he noticed everyone's reaction. Turning around, he saw Yu Qianqiu looking at him. At this moment, the world-famous Dan addict couldn't help but feel a little nervous. Who the token would belong to depended on Yu Qianqiu's words. Yu Qianqiu took a step forward and bowed to Elder Guan. Disciple Yu Qianqiu sincerely begs Elder Guan to accept me as a disciple. Saying this, he knelt down. Immediately, the elders who had been arguing for a long time were all dumbfounded. All kinds of sorrowful and regretful expressions appeared on their faces. Elder Guan was startled, as if he didn't believe it. But then he reacted and laughed loudly. Good. Yu Qianqiu, this old man agrees to accept you as a disciple. Get up. No need to be so courteous. Saying this, he personally helped Yu Qianqiu up. His complacent laughter spread in all directions, as if he was even happier than when he concocted a peerless divine pill. Yu Qianqiu, who was the closest to him, felt his ears go numb from the sound of his laughter. Cheng Gengqing, who was standing to the side, had finally seen it for himself. Normally, these dignified elders would actually say anything for a token. He couldn't help but admire Yu Qianqiu's courage. If he had encountered such a situation, he probably wouldn't have known what to do. However, he didn't know if there would be any negative consequences. Thinking about this, he sneaked a peek at the elders' reactions. Sure enough, their expressions didn't look good. Everyone, why are you still crowding around here? Could it be that you want to congratulate me? This old man appreciates your kind intentions. Everyone, please make way for me. I'm going to bring my new disciple back to the alchemy pavilion. Haha. Elder Guan held onto Yu Qianqiu's wrist and laughed. He was too happy today. Not mentioning the fact that he didn't get the immortal supporting token. Just being able to stand out from the dozens of elders was enough to make him happy. Especially when he saw the expressions on everyone's faces, as if they had swallowed a fly. Chapter 48. Yu Qianqiu had already become someone else's disciple. Naturally, the immortal supporting medallion had also become someone else's. This was agreed upon by everyone. No matter how unwilling they were, what else could they say? Elder Liu, who proposed this idea, saw Elder Guan's smug expression. He snorted coldly and flew away first. None of the elders were willing to look at Elder Guan's face anymore. They flew away one after another. In an instant all the elders left. Cheng Gengqing looked at the disciples who were watching from afar. Many of them were disciples of these elders. Cheng Gengqing felt that it was not a wise choice to stay with Elder Guan. He immediately bowed and said, Elder Guan, this disciple will also take his leave. After Elder Guan happily nodded his head, he bid farewell to Yu Qianqiu and left. The disciples who were watching didn't know what had happened. Some of them recognized Cheng Gengqing and walked towards him. The others scattered in twos and threes. Yu Qianqiu saw Elder Guan's smug expression. He was speechless. He took out the medallion and presented it with both hands. Master, the sect leader has instructed me to hand over the immortal supporting medallion after I become his disciple. Good. The sect leader has always been fair. I will obey his orders. Elder Guan took the medallion with a smile. He looked at it carefully in his hand before throwing it into his storage bag. He didn't have the passion he had when he snatched it. Then, he led Yu Qianqiu back with satisfaction. The two of them answered each other's questions along the way. Yu Qianqiu, who was almost confused by the difference in seniority, finally solved his doubts. Just now, when he bade farewell to Cheng Gengqing, he called him Grandmaster Cheng. Now, when he called Elder Guan, he had to call him Master. He had lowered Elder Guan's seniority for no reason. Yu Qianqiu almost couldn't call him that. Now, he understood that Martial Uncle and Master were just honorifics for people who had reached a certain level of cultivation. They didn't mean anything about seniority. In supporting Immortal Island, other than the master who taught you, there was no such thing as seniority. As long as your cultivation surpassed others, others would have to address you as Martial Uncle or Martial Ancestor. This was a very normal thing. Yu Qianqiu sighed endlessly with emotion. Don't be fooled by the messy name of the island of supporting immortals. It imperceptibly contained a competitive mechanism, and it had the meaning of the capable rising up and the incapable falling down. In addition, There was a rule that those who failed to reach the Foundation establishment realm 3 times would be expelled from supporting Immortal Island. It was a complete elimination system. Even if those who remained were not geniuses, they were elites. It was no wonder that supporting Immortal Island had its current status in the cultivation world. From today onwards, he will be a disciple of supporting Immortal Island's Pill Refinement Pavilion. Elder Guan's full name was Guan Weiwu. After knowing his name, Yu Qianqiu felt a toothache. This name was indeed impressive. It was similar to Guan Yu's name in his golden bead. It seemed that he and Guan Weiwu were fated. This newly acknowledged master was indeed impatient. After leading him for a while, he lost his patience. After pointing out the location of the Pill Refinement Pavilion, he turned into a stream of light and flew towards the mountain peak in front of him. Yu Qianqiu had long heard of the Pill Refinement Pavilion's fame in the cultivation world. It was built on the highest mountain range of supporting Immortal Island. At the very top, there was a huge hall. When he was halfway up the mountain, he smelled a rich medicinal fragrance. After taking a few more breaths, he immediately felt refreshed. The mountain peak was barren, and there was no trace of green. It was completely different from the lush greenery below the halfway up the mountain. Generally speaking, the higher the terrain, the lower the temperature. The strange thing was that the higher one went up the mountain, the higher the temperature. It was like the bottom of the mountain and the top of the mountain were 2 different seasons. Although Yu Qianqiu's cultivation wasn't high, this little difference in temperature didn't affect him. He just felt that it was strange. Why was there such a strange phenomenon? Could it be because of the fire on the mountain peak? After walking up the stone steps to the top of the mountain, he saw a white stone archway in front of him. The 3 words Pill Refinement Pavilion were written on it. Behind the archway was a huge ancient building complex. Between the archway and the building complex was a field paved with bluestone. There were many people on the ground, looking for all kinds of herbs. They must be spirit herbs used for alchemy. Yu Qianqiu turned back to look at the bottom of the mountain. He looked at the buildings on the mountain peak that were much shorter. This was probably the territory of other elders like his master. This made him a little puzzled. What he couldn't understand was that according to his understanding of this world, the higher the status of a person, the higher the place they lived. His master didn't have the highest status on supporting Immortal Island. At the very least, there was a sect master above him. How could he live in the highest place? As his thoughts ran wild, someone behind him asked, "Are you Yu Qianqiu?" "That's right." Yu Qianqiu turned around and replied. Below the archway stood a tall, skinny man with a cold face. His eyes revealed a trace of unfriendliness as he looked at Yi Shiwen. The man snorted and said, "Are you the new disciple that Elder Guan said was accepted? I don't think you are very good. Come with me." After saying that, he showed his butt to Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu was a little angry. Who did he think he was? What did I do to provoke you? The moment you come, you give me eye medicine. Although he really wanted to kick the butt in front of him, he could still tell how heavy it was. It wasn't the right time to do so. He could only obediently follow behind the middle-aged man and stare at his butt. His originally good mood instantly became very gloomy. The middle-aged man led him to a courtyard. He pointed to a room and said, "From today on, you will live here. Cultivate with the disciples here. Do whatever they do. Remember what I said. Don't think you can do whatever you want just because you are Elder Guan's disciple." After saying that, he snorted and said, "I heard you are a wandering cultivator from outside the island. You are only level 10 Qi training. Am I right?" No. Yu Qianqiu said respectfully. "What should I call you?" "Yen Shu." The middle-aged man glanced at him and said arrogantly, "Late-stage core formation. According to the rules of Fuxian Island, you should call me Ancestor." "Oh, so it's Ancestor Yen." Disciple Yu Qianqiu greets Ancestor Yen. Yu Qianqiu bowed in thought. There are all kinds of birds in a big forest. I've never seen such a crazy person. Yen Shu, I will remember you. I will repay you in the future. Yen Shu snorted. Calling him Ancestor twice seemed to make him feel better. Then he said, "Fuxian Island has a rule. Disciples who haven't reached the Foundation establishment stage are not allowed to wander around on the island. You just stay here and don't run around. When your fellow disciples finish their business and come back, you can ask them if you have anything you don't understand. Do you remember what I said? Yu Qianqiu smiled respectfully. I won't forget Ancestor Yan's words. Disciple will remember them. Good. Yan Shu left the smiling Yu Qianqiu and walked out of the courtyard with his hands behind his back. Someone shouted, Ancestor Yan, have a safe trip. Chapter 49. After watching Yan Shu leave until he disappeared, Yu Qianqiu straightened his slightly bent waist. The flattering expression on his face turned into contemplation. His strength was too weak. Ever since he entered the cultivation world, anyone with a little bit of strength would be able to pinch him. Yet he still had to act like a tortoise. All of this was because he was too weak. A certain great man said it well. If you fall behind, you'll be beaten. This is really a wise saying. This world was too crazy. The cultivation circle regarded human lives as worthless. His little life could be taken away at any time. The golden bead was a safe place. Did he have to hide in the golden bead for the rest of his life, just because it was dangerous? But what about Chu Ping, who is waiting for me in Ongquangsung? Can I get her out without strength? Even if I get her out, do I have to let her hide with me in the golden pearl forever? No. Even if she's willing, I can't let her hide with me forever. How can I let a woman who treats me sincerely suffer for the rest of her life? Thinking of this, Yu Qianqiu smiled bitterly and shook his head. He muttered, as long as I can increase my strength, I don't care if I'm a good person or a bad person. Even if I have to become the enemy of the entire cultivation world, I don't care. Pinger, when I really become notorious, I hope you can understand. Because of you from today onwards, my conscience will be eaten by dogs. After a firm belief was established in his heart, Yu Qianqiu let out a long breath. It's not that I don't want to be a good person, but I don't have the conditions to be a good person. What's more important than living? There's a saying in my previous life. If you're poor, take care of yourself. If you're rich, take care of the world. After walking around the small courtyard twice, he didn't find anyone here. He guessed that they went out to do something, and probably wouldn't come back for a while. Pushing open the room that Yan Shu designated for him, there was almost nothing inside. There was a table, a chair, and a bed. There was nothing else. Since he was bored, he closed the door and disappeared from the room, returning to the golden pearl space. The young cultivator who was hugging a spirit stone and absorbing it was the person he kidnapped from 100 Flower Valley. Yu Qianqiu looked at him and smiled. What's your name? Hearing someone speak, the young cultivator sitting cross-legged slowly opened his eyes. When he saw Yu Qianqiu standing in front of him, his expression immediately changed. He jumped up and shouted, You thief, let me out! With that, he charged at Yu Qianqiu, as if he was going to fight to the death. Yu Qianqiu smiled and shook his head. Within the golden bead world, he was the one in charge. Probably no one could do anything to him. Even the white fox could only stare at him helplessly, let alone this young cultivator with a shallow cultivation. Just as he was about to dodge, the young cultivator, who was rushing forward, suddenly screamed. He held his head with both hands and fell down, rolling on the ground in pain. Yu Qianqiu was stunned for a moment before he understood what was going on. He had seen this phenomenon on Guanyu before. It was the sign of being controlled by someone after their natal Yuan Shun was forcefully extracted. In the golden bead space, only the white fox could do this. Closing his eyes to sense the golden bead world, the location of the white fox and Guanyu appeared in his mind. Yu Qianqiu's figure disappeared and reappeared in the white fox's garden. Seeing Guanyu holding a bag and taking out a handful of seeds to sow on the plowed land with the white fox guiding him, Yu Qianqiu couldn't help but laugh. Guanyu was really lucky to have such a beauty accompanying him to farm. Sister, are you planting flowers again? Yu Qianqiu smiled. The white fox didn't even raise her head. Instead, Guanyu stopped what he was doing and said, Yo, Boss Yu is here. Did supporting Immortal Island accept you? The white fox probably didn't like his nagging, so she glared at him. Guanyu smiled embarrassedly and took out the seeds to continue planting his flowers. Then, she looked at Yu Qianqiu and frowned. You joined supporting Immortal Island again? From her tone, It seemed that she didn't like people who joined other sections. Yes. Yu Qianqiu originally wanted to ask Guan Yu about supporting Immortal Island, but he heard the unhappiness in the White Fox's words. He changed the topic and said, "Sister, you guys go on with your work. I still have something to do." Before the White Fox could say anything, he disappeared and reappeared in front of the young cultivator. The young cultivator was sitting on the ground with a pale face. Yu Qianqiu asked again, "What's your name?" The young cultivator replied dispiritedly, "Chunfeng." Yu Qianqiu said with a smile, "Chunfeng, how many spirit stones can you earn by setting up a stall in a day? Look behind you. There are so many spirit stones that you can't use up. Use them however you want. Don't be half dead, get yourself together. Isn't it just having your natal primordial spirit taken away? You will get used to it after a long time. If you don't believe me, you can go to the flower garden over there. There is a guy called Guan Yu there, and his natal primordial spirit was taken away just like you. Look at how comfortable he is now. He has beauties to plant flowers with him every day." Hearing the word beauties, Chunfeng shuddered. He remembered the day he came in. When he was making a fuss, a woman as beautiful as a fairy suddenly appeared. He had never seen such a beautiful woman before, and he couldn't help but be mesmerized. Who knew that the woman would grab his head without saying a word, and take away his natal primordial spirit? The pain that came from the soul made people shudder. Seeing that he was still in a daze, Yu Qianqiu touched his nose and said with a smile, "Don't think too much. From the day you came in, you were destined to follow me. There are only benefits to following me. If you have time, improve your family's talisman-making skills. Who knows, I might need it someday. If you need any materials, let me know the next time I come. Sigh. I'm very busy, so I won't talk anymore. Think about it." After saying that, he disappeared, leaving the absent-minded Chunfeng still sitting on the ground. It was unknown whether he had heard what was said or not. Just as he returned to his room, he heard someone approaching from outside the courtyard. He opened the door and went out. There were 3 young people walking in. When the 3 saw Yu Qianqiu, they were stunned. After looking at each other, one of them opened his mouth and asked, "You are Yu Qianqiu?" "That's right." Yu Qianqiu was a little surprised. He asked, "How does this fellow Taoist know my name? I wonder who these 3 fellow Taoists are." "Haha, so you really are Yu Qianqiu. Your name has spread all over Fuxian Island today. A Fuxian order almost caused a dozen elders to fight. Tsk. I heard you are also level 10 Qi refinement, and have Elder Guan as your master. I guessed you would also be assigned to our courtyard. Haha, the 3 of us are also level 10 Qi refinement. My name is Lingfeng." He then introduced the people on his left and right. "This is Beizi, and he is Xianping. So it's 3 senior brothers." Yu Qianqiu bowed, but in his heart, he was wondering why these 3 people's names felt so weird. Lingfeng laughed brightly. "I don't dare to call you senior brother. Putting aside the fact that you are Elder Guan's disciple, the 3 of us can't see through your cultivation. I'm afraid we will have to call you senior brother." "That's right." Beizi on the left agreed. "Normal people don't have the chance to enter our courtyard. Since we are here, we are brothers. Xianping, can you share the good wine you've hidden with everyone?" "Okay," Xianping said expressionlessly. Yu Qianqiu was slightly startled. He thought that Xianping didn't want to take the wine, so he quickly smiled. "No need to trouble Brother Xian. I have wine here. I promise you 3 can drink to your heart's content." As he said this, he reached into his storage pouch. When he was at the pillar of the general's residence, Shi Shaotian gave him a lot of good wine. "Wait," Xianping shouted and coldly said, "You are the guest." He then walked towards a room. The meaning behind his words was that you are the guest, and there is no reason for a guest to greet the host. Yu Qianqiu's hand froze. He didn't know what to do. Lingfeng smiled. "Brother, you don't mind him. Xianping always speaks like this. You will know after spending a long time with him that he is cold on the outside, but warm on the inside. His words are harsh, but he doesn't mean any harm." Yu Qianqiu felt relieved, but Beizi stared at the storage pouch on his waist. She clicked her tongue. "Brother, you actually has a storage pouch. I have been on Fuxian Island for so many years, But I don't think I have seen a qi condensation cultivator with such a thing. This is good. I'm afraid it can't be bought with even a top-grade spirit stone, right? Ling Feng's eyes were filled with envy. Xian Ping, who came out with a big jar of wine, also said, good stuff. Since you like it, I will ask Master Cheng Gengqing to bring 3 for you the next time I meet him. Yu Qianqiu was often a stingy person, but he was always generous when it came to making friends. Ling Feng and Beizi looked at each other and smiled. They didn't take his words seriously. They both thought that he was just being perfunctory, but they didn't point it out. For qi condensation cultivators, storage pouches weren't something they could casually give away. Yu Qianqiu saw their expressions, but he didn't say anything. Some things didn't need to be explained. Actions were the most convincing. Besides, 3 storage pouches were nothing to him. Xian Ping simply said, drink. Chapter 50. The few of them sat around the stone table. After a few bowls of wine, the atmosphere changed. The 4 of them were less courteous and more straightforward. After some small talk, Yu Qianqiu had a rough understanding of the 3 of them. He could tell that Ling Feng and Beizi were candid and straightforward. They were passionate people, which was rare in the cultivation world. As for Xian Ping, he was a man of few words, but one sentence could make people choke. The 3 of them had good characters. Yu Qianqiu felt that the 3 of them were worth befriending. Besides, it wasn't a bad thing to make a few friends in an unfamiliar place. However, characters were rare in the cultivation world. Moreover, he met 3 of them at once. Yu Qianqiu had to ask in a roundabout way. It turned out that there was no other reason other than the fact that the 3 of them did not know how to conduct themselves. To put it bluntly, it was because the 3 of them did not know how to follow the waves and flatter the people in charge. Thus, the 3 of them were chased together. Usually, they would only do rough and menial work that no one was willing to do. It could also be said that the 3 of them would rather break than bend the knee and cause trouble. Unfortunately, the 3 of them didn't have a good aptitude. They had failed to build their foundation once. If they failed a second time, they would be chased out of Fuxian Island. Yu Qianqiu was dumbfounded. What was the meaning of him being sent here? Why was he put together with 3 people who had no future? Was Guan Weiwu going to burn the bridge after crossing it? Was he going to ignore him after getting the immortal supporting token? Ling Feng seemed to see through his depression. He drank the wine in his bowl and smiled. You were brought here by Yin Shu. I'm afraid there are some things you don't know. Yin Shu's father was Elder Yin Tua, who was in charge of the miscellaneous matters of Fuxian Island. When Yin Shu joined the Elixir Refinery Pavilion, he used his father's name to ask Elder Guan to be his master. In the end, Elder Guan didn't give him any face. He rejected him on the spot and gave him a random master. Yin Shu was a narrow-minded person, a real villain. At that time, he was furious, but he couldn't do anything to Elder Guan. Afterwards, when Elder Guan was in his prime, he accepted a few disciples, but without exception, all of them were killed by Yin Shu. Ugh! Yu Qianqiu almost spat out the wine in his mouth. After he managed to swallow it down, he heard Beizi chuckle and say, Brother Yu, are you scared? You are also Elder Guan's disciple. I hope you're the exception. Yu Qianqiu put down his wine bowl and looked at the 3 of them in astonishment. It can't be that exaggerated, right? Yin Shu killed Elder Guan's future disciple, just because Elder Guan didn't accept him as a disciple? It can't be faked. Xian Ping, who was immersed in his wine, concluded. Although he didn't speak much, his words were more useful than Ling Feng and Beizi's explanations. Yu Qianqiu completely dispelled the suspicion in his heart. He asked reluctantly, could it be that Elder Guan doesn't even care about his own disciple being killed? Beizi chuckled again. Haven't you heard of Elder Guan's nickname, Pill Addict? Other than alchemy, I don't think there's anything else he cares about. He even forgot about the disciple he accepted today the next day. Do you think a master like this can be relied on? Xian Ping, who was pouring wine, shook his head and said, he can't be relied on. Yu Qianqiu was speechless. There was such a muddle-headed master. Why did he have to meet him? He hated himself for being blind. Why did he choose Elder Guan as his master? Damn it! My life is even more bitter than a cabbage. Ling Feng grabbed the wine jar next to Xian Ping and filled Yu Qianqiu's bowl with wine. She said, if it wasn't for his father's prestige, and the fact that there are so many nascent soul cultivators, how could a core formation cultivator like Yan Shu be the caretaker of the alchemy pavilion? However, since he sent you to our courtyard, it seems like he does have the intention to harm you. Although that's the case, you don't have to worry too much. The rules of Fuxian Island aren't just for show. He won't dare to harm you openly. As long as you're vigilant, it won't be easy for him to harm you. Yu Qianqiu nodded and didn't say anything. A fierce look flashed through his eyes. No one noticed that he already had the intention to kill Yan Shu, although he didn't know if the Yan Shu mentioned by the three of them was really so unbearable. If he really had to live in fear every day, then there was no need to think about it. It wasn't the first time he did something like this. However, in order to succeed in building his foundation, he still had to endure it. It was hard to find a sect with such good conditions. Moreover, what he heard was only a one-sided story from the three of them. Some things were better to see with one's own eyes. Thinking about this, Yu Qianqiu cupped his hands and smiled. Thank you, three brothers, for your reminder. I'll remember it. This is the first time we've met, so let's not talk about this disappointing thing. Everyone says that Fuxian Island is a blessed land. I haven't seen the beautiful scenery here. I wonder if the three brothers can take me there to see it? Xianping shook his head. No. Yu Qianqiu was startled. Why? Didn't Yan Shu tell you that disciples under the foundation establishment stage can't wander around without permission? Ling Feng asked curiously. The other two also looked at him. Yu Qianqiu thought that Yan Shu really did tell him such a rule. At that time, he thought that Yan Shu was just scaring a newcomer like him, so he didn't take it to heart. Now it seemed that it was true. He couldn't help but ask, is there really such a rule? Why is that? It's very simple, Ling Feng said. Only disciples above the foundation establishment stage can be considered as true disciples of Fuxian Island. They can enter any place on Fuxian Island that doesn't have any restrictions. This includes going to the scripture depository to read all kinds of cultivation books that can be made public in the sect. Secondly, every sect has secrets that they don't want outsiders to know. Fuxian Island is no exception. The most important thing is that disciples who fail to build their foundation 3 times will be expelled from the sect. Brother Yu, now you should understand why disciples under the foundation establishment stage can't wander around without permission, right? I understand. They're afraid that those expelled disciples will leak the secrets of the Fuxian Island. Yu Qianqiu frowned. In other words, disciples who haven't reached the foundation establishment stage, like us, aren't considered true disciples of Fuxian Island. Ling Feng stood up and patted his shoulder with a smile. Brother Yu, don't take it too hard. In the entire cultivation world, which sect's disciple is like Fuxian Island, that has 3 chances to obtain the foundation establishment pill? I'm afraid there's no other sect other than Fuxian Island. Just this alone is enough to make other sects' disciples envious. As far as I know, some sects' disciples don't even have the chance to get a foundation establishment pill in their entire lives. Yes, Baizi nodded. I've thought it through. If I fail 3 times and get kicked out of Fuxian Island, I have nothing to say. The chances are the same. I can only blame myself for being inferior. Me too. The taciturn Xianping also agreed. They had misunderstood. It wasn't that Yu Qianqiu couldn't get over it. It was that Guan Yu was too dishonest. He didn't even tell him these basic things, causing him to be in the dark and keep asking idiotic questions. It was obvious that Guan Yu had a problem with his mentality, and he was deliberately trying to embarrass him. As for whether he was a true disciple of Fuxian Island, it wasn't important to him. As long as he built his foundation, everything was fine. Moreover, he had a trump card that could solve all his troubles. Thinking about this, Yu Qianqiu smiled. Wasn't Guan Weiwu the most powerful in the elixir refinery pavilion? Wasn't Guan Weiwu an elixir fanatic? I don't believe that the elixir recipe of an elixir ancestor can't deal with you. Chapter 51. He thought about how he had never looked at the pill formula in detail. Without a basic understanding of it, he reckoned that he wouldn't be able to fool Guan Weiwu, even if he wanted to. With this thought in mind, he couldn't bring himself to drink anymore. Yu Qianqiu raised his head and drained the wine in his bowl. He put down the bowl, stood up and apologized to the three. "I'm not feeling well. I'll go back and rest first. Next time, I'll treat you all to a good drink." With that, he hurriedly turned around and left. The three of them stared at him in shock as he entered his room and closed the door. Ling Feng quietly said, "It looks like he's still taking things too hard." "It's nothing. He'll be able to accept it after some time," Beizi said. Xian Ping, who had been drinking silently, turned his head to look at the closed door. He suddenly said, "Not necessarily." Then he continued drinking. Ling Feng and Beizi looked at each other, unsure of what he meant by that. The moment Yu Qianqiu closed the door, he immediately disappeared from the room. He urgently wanted to find the White Fox, hoping that she could help him remove the restrictions on the Jade Archive. Among the people he knew, the White Fox was probably the only one who had that ability. Who else could he look for but her? She was able to set up a formation with just a few spirit stones, so she must have a certain understanding of formations and restrictions. Returning to the Golden Pearl, he used his divine sense to investigate and confirmed the White Fox's location. With a thought, he appeared outside the White Fox's garden in the blink of an eye. There was now another capable assistant in the flower bed. Chen Feng seemed to have thought things through and was busy farming with Guan Yu. Seeing Yu Qianqiu's arrival, the former glanced at him before lowering his head and disappearing. He snorted coldly to express his dissatisfaction, while the latter happily nodded and smiled in greeting. Yu Qianqiu wasn't in the mood to pay attention to the two of them. He affectionately called out to the White Fox, "Sister," and walked over. The White Fox's peerless beauty, coupled with her white robe, stood among the green leaves and fresh flowers. It was very pleasing to the eye. She frowned slightly and said, "Why are you so diligent today? You haven't even been out for a day, right?" Yu Qianqiu smiled in embarrassment. He naturally couldn't directly say that he had something he needed her help with. However, he was also thick-skinned and could easily flatter her. Who told Big Sister to have a beauty that could captivate even the birds and beasts? A beauty that could outshine the moon and put flowers to shame. I miss Big Sister, so I couldn't wait to see beautiful Big Sister. One had to know that there were no such words of praise in this world that could captivate even the birds and beasts. Suddenly hearing such words from his mouth, the White Fox, who knew she was beautiful and was used to being praised by others, could not help but feel her heart flutter, and her pretty face blushed. No matter how extraordinary a woman was, who wouldn't want to be the most beautiful woman in the world? Who wouldn't want the nicest words of praise to be used on them? Even immortals were no exception. The heart under her plump chest was beating a little erratically. Looking at this younger brother who always said frivolous words to her, she wanted to get angry but couldn't. She had finally experienced this scoundrel brother of hers. Every time he said words that could make a woman flustered, she really couldn't stand it. Although she knew he wasn't really frivolous, she still had to act angry, otherwise, he would become arrogant. She then asked coldly, "Your words sound nice, but I'm afraid you have something to ask me for help with?" This sister really knew him too well. She immediately saw through his intentions. However, when he was free, he really didn't come to see her. Yu Qianqiu was a little embarrassed to open his mouth. His eyes wandered around, pretending not to hear anything as he admired the flowers around him. Yu Qianqiu stared blankly at the flower bed to his side, which had all sorts of flowers in full bloom. If he remembered correctly, the last time he came here, he had clearly seen Guan Yu sowing the seeds. It hadn't even been a day since then, so why were the flowers already so red? How could they grow so fast? Could it be that he remembered wrongly? Yu Qianqiu thought that his memory was pretty good, but he didn't have a photographic memory. But this kind of thing shouldn't be wrong. He looked around the flower bed, and then looked at where he was standing. It shouldn't be wrong. When were these flowers planted? Yu Qianqiu pointed at the flower bed beside him, and asked suspiciously. The White Fox didn't answer his question. Instead, it turned its head to the side proudly, and also pretended to admire the flowers. This was something that he learned quickly from his younger brother. Yu Qianqiu looked at Guan Yu, who was smiling and looking at him. The latter waved at him and said, Boss, do you want to know what's going on? Come here. I'll show you something good. Guan Yu's words clearly showed that he knew what was going on, and he didn't remember wrongly. There was indeed something wrong with this flower bed. Yu Qianqiu nodded and walked over obediently. He asked curiously, "What good thing do you want to see?" Guan Yu smiled and didn't answer. He took out a small bag from the storage bag on his waist and grabbed something from it. He put it in his palm and stretched it over. Yu Qianqiu stretched his head out and stared blankly at the two black dots on Guan Yu's palm for a long time. He then asked uncertainly, "Are they flower seeds?" "Smart. Boss is the boss. You can even see through it." Guan Yu looked at the two black dots on his palm and said, "That's right, they are two flower seeds. F***ck, you dare to trick me." Yu Qianqiu was angry. He rolled up his sleeves and was about to make a move. This Guan Yu was getting more and more impudent. He had schemed against him several times, and seeing that he didn't care about it, he was getting more and more excited. Pfft! The white fox on the side couldn't help but cover her mouth and laugh. She seemed to be very happy to see her brother make a fool of himself. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. He turned his head and couldn't help but be stunned. This was the first time he saw the white fox smile like this. Under her smile, all the flowers around her paled in comparison. He finally understood why the ancients in his previous life would describe beauties as being able to outshine the moon and put the flowers to shame. No matter how beautiful the flowers were, how could they be more beautiful than the beauty in front of him? Guan Yu and Chen Feng were also stunned. They had never seen the white fox like this. The white fox clearly realized that she had lost her composure. Her pretty face instantly darkened, and she glared at the three of them coldly. The three of them shuddered at the same time and woke up. "Hey, big sister. You really are a seductress who can charm people to death." Yu Qianqiu groaned helplessly in his heart. He looked at Guan Yu and said, "Forget it. Since you were able to make my big sister smile, I won't argue with you today." "Why are you arguing? I said I would show you something good. Do you think I would lie to you?" Guan Yu said tit for tat. He then held the seeds in his hand and said, "Look carefully." After saying that, he squatted down and dug out two small holes in the soft soil that had been loosened. He picked up the two seeds in his hand and put them in the two holes. Yu Qianqiu, who was considered a farmer in his previous life, was naturally no stranger to farming. Although he had never grown flowers, he had grown vegetables before. He stared at Guan Yu's actions with his eyes wide open. He wanted to know the difference between growing flowers and vegetables. If there was no difference, how could the flowers grow so fast? After putting the seeds, Guan Yu reached out and untied a small bamboo tube from his waist. He gently pulled out the wooden stopper and took out a small wooden spoon from his belt. He reached into the bamboo tube and slowly scooped out a spoonful of something. The thing that he scooped out was purple. Yu Qianqiu thought it was familiar. He seemed to have seen it somewhere before. Chapter 52. Pouring a spoonful of the purple substance into the small pit where the seed was placed, Guan Yu quickly moved the soft soil around the small pit into the pit. Shortly after, he scooped out some water from the bucket beside him and poured it over the soil. Yu Qianqiu watched as he completed a series of actions, then stared at the small pit. Not long after, a crack appeared on the surface of the soil where the water had seeped into, followed by a few more. Suddenly, the center of the intersecting cracks arched slightly and broke open, revealing a conspicuous whitish-green dot. If one did not pay attention, they might not notice it. Soon, the green bean dot swayed slightly and gradually stretched out, revealing the figure of a small green sprout. Yu Qianqiu sucked in a breath of cold air, his eyes wide and tongue-tied. Is that the seed germinating? How is this possible? He then looked at Guan Yu and cried out in surprise. "How did you do it?" Guan Yu smiled and gestured at Luya with his lips, indicating for him to continue watching. The small green sprout burst forth with vitality. Its branches and leaves curled up and wriggled in all directions, expanding and growing at a speed visible to the naked eye. The tender leaves continued to multiply, branching out in all directions. The main trunk stopped growing when it reached a person's thigh, gradually turning from translucent green to brownish red. The entire plant seemed to have solidified, stopping there without any movement. If not for the shocking growth process, no one would be able to tell the difference between this plant and other plants. Was that it? Yu Qianqiu retracted his thoughts and let out a breath. Suddenly, the plant moved again, its branches and leaves swaying, attracting his attention again. The plant's silence seemed to be brewing something. Its branches were trembling, and the joints of the leaves and stems had bulges the size of beans. This was the case in many other places. When it reached the size of a broad bean, flower buds could be clearly seen. Then, as if something was trying to break free from its restraints, the flower buds struggled to break free. Bright colors began to bloom, expand, take shape and solidify. Fresh flowers appeared in front of them, their petals bright and fresh, their stamens pitiful. After a long time, when there was no movement, the people standing at the side could smell a faint fragrance. Just like that, a plant with dozens of flowers blooming on its branches stood in front of him. From sowing, irrigating, germinating, growing, branching, budding, and blooming, it was only the time it took to brew a cup of tea. It was really incredible. Yu Qianqiu, who had been holding his breath for a long time, slowly turned his head and looked at the bamboo tube in Guan Yu's hand. Apart from the purple substance, he did not notice anything unusual during the planting process. It was obvious that the substance in the bamboo tube was the key. Guan Yu smiled and shook the bamboo tube in his hand, saying, "Let me show you again." After saying that, he squatted down and repeated the planting process in another small pit with seeds. However, when he placed the purple substance, he added half a spoonful more. Soon, the seed grew into a plant with flowers swaying on its branches. Yu Qianqiu, who had been silently observing its growth, did not notice anything unusual about it. Looking at the two flowers standing side by side, just as he was feeling suspicious, an abnormality suddenly occurred. The flower that was planted later had its petals changed. The dazzling bright color was dimming. To be exact, it looked like it was slowly aging. The flower began to wither, its petals falling off one by one, then the stamens dying, followed by the flower stem falling off. Following that, the branches and leaves withered and turned yellow, and the leaves fell back to their roots. In the end, only a withered branch was left on the ground, and it was hard to tell that it was the same kind of flower that was in full bloom beside it. "How is it?" Guan Yu shook the bamboo tube again and said with a smile, "What I showed you is not bad, right?" Yu Qianqiu nodded and said, "It is indeed a good thing. It can actually condense the growth process of a flower in the time it takes to brew a cup of tea. It is indeed amazing, but..." He suddenly pointed at the purple substance in the distance and asked, "What I want to know the most now is, what method did you use to store the purple chaos in this small bamboo tube?" Just as the flowers bloomed and withered, he suddenly felt something and guessed what was in Guan Yu's hand. "Ha! I knew I couldn't hide it from you." He originally wanted to tease Yu Qianqiu, but he didn't expect to be seen through so quickly. Guan Yu raised the thing in his hand and sighed. "Although I don't know what this is, you know this place better than I do. You said that this is the purple chaos, so it should be the purple chaos. It was purely an accident that I found out about its use." He looked at the purple chaos in the distance and said, "When I first saw this thing, I was very curious about what was behind the purple. After a lot of effort, I realized that although this thing is soft, I can't push it away, cut it, pierce it, or tear it. It is really amazing, let alone store it. I thought you might have a way. After all, you know this place better. But now it seems that you don't know." Yu Qianqiu nodded and said, "Then how did you do it?" "Haha, what a coincidence. A few days ago, I was hungry, so I took a stick to catch a rabbit. No one would have thought that the purple chaos that couldn't even be broken by iron and stone could actually be cut by the stick in my hand. After trying a few more times, I finally realized that this purple chaos was not afraid of anything. Only things with the wood attribute could restrain it. I made a wooden spoon and dug out a few pieces to store it. But I realized that using anything else to store it would be useless. Once I put it in, it would slowly disappear. In the end, I remembered that bamboo is also something with the wood attribute, so I got a piece and tried it. Haha, it really worked." Guan Yu laughed proudly, So that's how it is. Yu Qianqiu suddenly understood. He then pointed at the bamboo tube in his hand, and pointed at the blooming flowers and asked, "How did you know that it has such a magical effect? Did you also discover it by accident?" Guan Yu secretly glanced at the white fox and smiled sheepishly. "Haven't I been planting flowers every day? That day, when I was bored, I got excited and wanted to see what the purple chaos would do as fertilizer. So I poured a tube of it. In the end I was shocked. Only then did I realize that the purple chaos had such a magical effect. After trying it a few more times, I found out that the amount of it can control the growth rate of the flowers. Tisk tsk. I didn't expect that there would be such a treasure in my territory. How unexpected." Yu Qianqiu sighed and said, "It must be useful for other plants too, right? Yunchang, have you tried other things?" The white fox at the side looked at Guan Yu. It seemed to be the first time it heard Guan Yu and Yunchang being addressed as such. Guan Yu nodded and said, "I've tried a few. They should be able to accelerate the growth of plants. However, I found something strange. The flowers and plants that we plant don't seem to bear fruit or produce seeds. Logically speaking, it's impossible. It's still understandable if there are a few. How can everything just bloom and not bear fruit? It's the same for the ones that grow with the purple chaos. You saw it just now. Is it related to this place? Boss, didn't you always say that this is your territory? Please explain it to me." Yu Qianqiu was also thinking about why. He didn't hear the meaning in Guan Yu's words that made things difficult for him. His gaze swept across the flower bed that was in full bloom. He seemed to feel that something was missing. After a while, his furrowed brows suddenly relaxed. Yu Qianqiu pointed at the withered branch that had experienced the ups and downs and said, "Yunchang, do it the way it did just now." Chapter 53. Guan Yu saw the seriousness in his words and knew what he wanted to do, so he did as he was told. A moment later, a flower bloomed in front of them. Yu Qianqiu didn't say anything. Before the flowers withered, he quickly plucked a flower. He pinched the flower stem and quickly rubbed it against the other flowers. Soon, the stamen of the flower in his hand had intimate contact with the other stamens. Guan Yu didn't know what he was doing. Chen Feng stopped what he was doing. Even the white fox looked at Yu Qianqiu. The three of them looked at the flower with curiosity. Suddenly Yu Qianqiu smiled and said, "That's right. It should be like this." What happened next surprised the three of them. The flower that they thought would wither did not wither immediately. Instead, there was an additional procedure. The center of the petals began to bear fruits. After the fruits gradually took shape, the petals began to wither. After Yu Qianqiu did something to it, the plant didn't wilt. Instead, the wilting process turned into blooming. The three of them looked at Yu Qianqiu in disbelief. Guan Yu mumbled, "How is this possible?" Although the question he raised could not be considered as deliberately making things difficult for Big Boss Yu, it was still a little provocative. However, he never expected that Big Boss Yu would be able to solve the problem that even White Fox could not solve with just a wave of his hand. The peerless White Fox gracefully walked to the front of the fruit-bearing plant. Her slender jade-like fingers plucked one of the fruits. After her fingernails pinched it open, there were black seeds lying inside. She picked it up and placed it in front of her jade-like nose to sniff it. Her face was full of surprise. Chen Feng's resentful eyes were now looking at Yu Qianqiu with a hint of respect. Actually, to Yu Qianqiu, this was common sense in his previous world. This was because there were no insects or bees to pollinate the flowers. These plants could only bloom but not bear fruit. If they didn't bear fruit, they wouldn't have any seeds. In his previous world, even elementary school students would know about this. Now that he was doing it, it was a little shocking. Yu Qianqiu couldn't help but feel embarrassed when he saw the three of them looking at him with stars of worship in their eyes. He chuckled and said, "Don't worship me. I'm just a legend. Look at you. Tell me what's going on." The white fox held the peeled fruit in her hand and shouted. Yu Qianqiu laughed and rubbed his nose. "Sister, it's a long story. It involves botany and biology. It's a huge systematic subject. I'm afraid you won't understand." At this point, he saw that the three of them had a look of curiosity in their eyes. His expression also became serious as he said, I'm afraid that you won't understand if I explain it in a complicated way. I'll explain it in a simpler way. Everything in the world was divided into yin and yang. If there was a sky, there would be an earth. Just like if there was a sun in the sky, there would also be a moon. If there is light, there will be darkness. Everything in the world is also divided into yin and yang, which is what we call male and female. I've already said it very simply. I don't know if it's too complicated. Do you understand? The three of them nodded to show that they understood. That's good. Then I'll continue. Listen carefully. Yu Qianqiu made a fist and coughed. He continued. Everything in the world is divided into yin and yang, male and female. It should be easy for you to understand. Whether it's humans, pigs, dogs, cows, or sheep, they are all divided into male and female. A man alone can't give birth to a child. Similarly, a woman alone can't give birth to a child. Therefore, there needs to be a union between a man and a woman. No matter if it's 2 legs or 4 legs, it's the same. I call these things that can move and walk zoology. Above zoology is biology. Biology refers to all living things in the world. Living things include plants. The so-called plants are what I'm going to talk about next. This is botany. Let me ask you one more time. Do you understand? The three of them nodded again. They originally had a little bit of doubt in their hearts, but it was dispelled by his well-founded words. The atmosphere of learning was very strong. Yu Qianqiu was very satisfied with this effect. He pretended to say again, "What are plants?" Flowers, trees, fruits, and vegetables that we usually eat belong to the category of plants. This includes the flowers and plants that the three of you are planting. They can grow naturally. Of course, this involves a higher level of natural science. You won't understand even if I explain it, so I won't say it. These flowers and plants can grow naturally. They are also living things. Therefore, they are also within the scope of biology. Don't underestimate these flowers and plants. They are the same as the animals in zoology that we talked about earlier. They also have yin and yang, and they also need to be combined. Guan Yu asked me why these plants only bloom, but not bear fruit. Now I'll explain it to you in detail. I've talked too much. I'm very thirsty. Is there any water here? Yes. Chen Feng replied as he scooped up a ladle of water from a nearby bucket and respectfully brought it to Yu Qianqiu. There was no trace of resentment on Yu Qianqiu's face. Yu Qianqiu drank the water and returned the ladle to him. He said, "Thank you." He then continued, "Why do the flowers that you plant only bloom but not bear fruit? Everyone look." He pointed to a plant that was full of flowers and said, "There are many flowers blooming here. Don't they all look the same?" Yes, they all look the same, but they are not. These flowers are also divided into yin and yang. If they want to bear fruit and produce seeds, just like humans, they also need to combine yin and yang. However, they can't combine like humans. Therefore, they need external help. Just like what I did just now, it's also one of the ways to help them combine. Hearing this, Guan Yu was puzzled. That can't be right. The flowers and plants in the outside world haven't been helped by humans to combine, but they still bloom and produce seeds. Chen Feng and the white fox also looked at him suspiciously. Obviously, they agreed with what Guan Yu said. That's a very good question. It involves entomology and zoology. Yu Qianqiu expressed his praise and said, "Of course, the flowers and plants outside are not helped by humans. They are other animals, which are the insects in animals." What are insects? All of you should have seen butterflies, bees, and other insects, right? If you have observed carefully, you will find that insects like bees like to hover on all kinds of blooming flowers. After they get pollen on the flowers, when they land on another flower, they naturally help the flowers to complete a union. The bees are the medium between them, so the plants outside can bloom, bear fruit, and reproduce. If you don't believe me, I can bring some bees in from the outside next time. Then, you will know if what I said is true. After his explanation, the three of them suddenly understood. Everyone had seen the habits of bees and butterflies. Thinking about it carefully, it seemed to be the case. Although they didn't have a direct impression, the three of them basically believed what he said was true. Sigh. I didn't expect a half-baked person like me to be able to make such a big noise here. I actually have the talent to be a teacher. It's really rare. Yu Qianqiu held back the pride in his heart and didn't show it. He said with a smile, "At this point, everyone should know what is going on. There is no need to say more complicated things. Let's stop here." Chapter 54. They had heard it all. The three of them had complicated looks in their eyes. They had not expected Yu Qianqiu to be so knowledgeable. Zoology, botany, natural science, and entomology were all unheard of. Their horizons had been broadened today. Young Chunfeng's eyes were filled with admiration, while Guan Yu looked slightly ashamed. Yu Qianqiu seemed to see a strange light in the white fox's eyes, which made his heart beat faster. Yu Qianqiu remembered why he had come, and said nervously, "Sister, there's something I need your help with." The white fox glanced at him with her bright eyes and softly replied, Seeing that his sister had agreed, Yu Qianqiu was overjoyed. He hurriedly took out the pill recipe jade archive and handed it over, saying, "I know your skills are extraordinary, sister. There's something recorded in this jade archive that I would like to take a look at, but someone has placed heavy restrictions on it. I'll have to trouble sister to help me open it." Guan Yu and Chen Feng did not care about what they were talking about. The two of them ran to an empty space to examine the botany that Yu Qianqiu had mentioned. The white fox took the pill recipe jade archive and examined it. Her brows furrowed slightly. Yu Qianqiu asked nervously, "Sister, is it impossible to remove?" The white fox shook her head lightly and said, "The person who set up the restrictions has a very high level of attainment in formations. There are a total of 7 layers of restrictions. The first layer has already been broken, and the first few layers are not difficult for me. However, the last few layers are ones that I have never seen before. I'm afraid it will take some time to break them. Otherwise, forcefully breaking them will damage the items inside." As she finished speaking, her slender fingers began to move on the jade archive. Yu Qianqiu knew that she was breaking the restrictions, but he could not understand what she was doing. He felt that it was extremely mysterious. After 3 rays of white light flashed on the jade archive, the white fox's fingers stopped moving. After a long while, she exhaled and returned the jade archive, saying, "I've broken 3 of the remaining 6 layers of restrictions. I can't break the remaining 3 for now. I've memorized them, but I need some time to think about them." Yu Qianqiu took the jade archive and smiled sheepishly. "Breaking through 3 layers is enough. Don't worry about the rest. Sister can think about it slowly." The white fox nodded and stared at him without saying anything else. It turned around and walked toward the bamboo house outside the garden. On the other side, Guan Yu and Chen Feng exclaimed in amazement. Apparently, the results of the experiment were miraculous. Yu Qianqiu put away the jade archive and walked over with a smile on his face. When he saw Chen Feng, he suddenly thought of someone else. That day in the 100 Flowers Valley, aside from Chen Feng, he had also recruited a person who made and sold the fallen immortal incense. How come he hadn't seen Chen Feng after so many visits? "Yuncheng, I have something to ask you." Guan Yu patted the dirt off his hands and stood up with a smile. "What's the matter?" Yu Qianqiu asked curiously. "Aside from Chen Feng, I brought another person with me. How come I haven't seen him after so many visits? Where did he go?" Guan Yu was taken aback. He suddenly laughed and said, "You're talking about that guy." He then put his mouth next to Yu Qianqiu's ear and whispered a few words. When Yu Qianqiu heard this, his expression changed drastically. He cursed, "Serves him right." It turned out that after the person who sold the incense was recruited, his primordial spirit was also forcefully extracted by the white fox, just like Chen Feng. However, when he saw the white fox's appearance, he was immediately shocked, and his lust was aroused. After that, he even tried to use the fallen immortal to pluck flowers without knowing the immensity of heaven and earth. It was unknown whether he was truly unaware, or just pretending to be unaware. His primordial spirit was already in the other party's hands. How could his every move escape her notice? As a result, the white fox destroyed his natal primordial spirit and turned his bones into ashes as fertilizer for the flowers. Sigh, what a pity for such a talented person. Forget it, he asked for it. He can't blame anyone else. You guys have fun. I'll take my leave first. See you later. Yu Qianqiu said regretfully. Wait. Guan Yu pulled him back and said, remember to bring a hive of bees when you come again. I want to understand the relationship between botany and zoology. All right, I'll keep that in mind. Returning to his room on supporting Immortal Island, Miaoyi listened carefully to make sure that there was no movement outside. He impatiently took out the pill recipe Jade Archive and began studying it. He inserted his divine sense into the Jade Archive and started reading from the first layer. Actually, the first layer wasn't a pill recipe. Instead, it explained some common knowledge about pill refining and the necessary preparations. For example, the best type of fire to use for pill refining and the best type of pill furnace to increase the success rate of pill refining. There was a whole bunch of information written on it. For Yu Qianqiu, who was a complete layman in pill refining, these headache-inducing questions were exactly what he needed to understand. These were the things he lacked. Hence, he read very attentively, memorizing every single word as he read. The second layer wasn't a pill recipe either. As soon as Yu Qianqiu's divine sense entered the Jade Archive, he felt as though he had entered a sea of various spiritual plants. Not only were the names and medicinal effects of the various spiritual plants described in detail, but even the shapes and appearances of the herbs were vividly displayed before his eyes. The level of detail was enough to make one's hair stand on end. Even the growth habits of each herb and the places where it was easy to collect them were listed. Yu Qianqiu was shocked. It wasn't just a normal shock, but a very, very shock. Even though he knew nothing about medicinal herbs or pill refining, he now knew that he had picked up a treasure. He was glad that he had made a wise decision to obtain this item from Lu Zhenguang. If he had given up on such a good item, he would be worse than a pig or a dog. Aside from his shock, he couldn't help but think back to the alchemy sect of yesteryear. A sect that was founded on pills had an unparalleled level of attainment in the field of alchemy. Just by looking at the countless number of medicinal herbs recorded in detail in the second layer, one could tell how much blood, sweat, and tears of many generations have been spent to gather them. Just this layer alone was enough to make it a rare treasure of the world. If someone wanted to rebuild the alchemy sect, he believed that with this Jade Archive of pill recipes, there wouldn't be any technical obstacles. It was impossible to memorize so many medicinal herbs in a short amount of time. He could only leave them for later. Sighing, Yu Qianqiu's divine sense entered the third layer. From the opening words of this layer, he could tell that it recorded various pill recipes suitable for use by foundation-building cultivators. Beside the name of each pill recipe was written the effects of the pill. Below it was a list of the required medicinal herbs. Even the order and timing of the medicinal herbs to be used in the concoction, and the age of the medicinal herbs were written down in detail. There were also various problems that would occur before the concoction of the pill was completed. TSK. This was really good stuff. Even if a layman came across this item, as long as he followed the instructions, he would be able to concoct a miraculous medicinal pill. He didn't expect that a mere foundation-building cultivator would be able to use so many medicinal pills to aid their cultivation. This was really strange. Since the alchemy sect was able to concoct so many miraculous medicinal pills to raise their cultivation, then their strength shouldn't be weak. How could they have been exterminated by someone? As Yu Qianqiu was reading, his eyelids suddenly twitched. The three words foundation-building pill appeared before his eyes, immediately attracting his attention. Chapter 55. After looking at it carefully, he realized that it was the pill recipe for the foundation-building pill. This pill recipe alone required 9 types of spiritual plants. Yu Qianqiu hurriedly noted down the names of the spiritual plants and the order of refinement. This was exactly what he needed. The fourth layer was the pill recipe for the core formation realm. Yu Qianqiu casually glanced at it. His mind was preoccupied with the foundation-building pill, so he lost interest in reading any further. The voices of Ling Feng and the others came from outside. He carefully put away the Jade Archive containing the pill recipe. Why don't I see Yu Qianqiu? It was Yan Shu's voice. Yu Qianqiu opened the door and shouted, He's here, he's here. Greetings, Grandmaster Yan. He hurriedly jogged over to Yan Shu and bowed with a smile. then greeted the other three with a smile. Yen Shu stared at him coldly and said, "From today onwards, you will work together with the three of them. If you dare to slack off, you will be severely punished. Do the four of you understand?" The last sentence was meant for everyone to hear. Only Yu Qianqiu smiled flatteringly and said, "Understood, understood." The other three remained expressionless. Yen Shu's expression darkened. He snorted coldly and turned to leave. "Grandmaster Yen, take care." Yu Qianqiu smiled as he watched Yen Shu leave. He then straightened his slightly bowed waist. Suddenly, he realized that the three people beside him were looking at him with disdain. It was obvious that they weren't interested in his flattery. Yu Qianqiu looked at the three of them and smiled. "My three brothers, I'll be working with you from today onwards. Please take good care of me." "Humph." Beizi glanced at him and mocked. "You're Elder Guan's disciple. It's not our turn to take care of you. If you want to take care of someone, you should at least look for your Grandmaster Yen." Ling Feng didn't even look him in the eye and said, "Let's go. Don't give Yen Shu an excuse." Xian Ping was even more ruthless. He shouted, "Wait!" He then ran into his room and brought out the huge jug of wine that he had drunk yesterday. When he passed by Yu Qianqiu, he said, "I drank with a dog yesterday, I'm ashamed." He then threw the jug of wine down the hill outside the courtyard. The three of them then walked out of the courtyard. Yu Qianqiu was stunned for a moment before he understood what Xian Ping meant. This was the first time he had heard Xian Ping say so many words in one sentence. He didn't expect that Xian Ping was actually scolding him. Looking at the figure walking away, he shook his head and smiled bitterly. Yesterday, they were drinking together like brothers, but today, they were like enemies. He had no choice but to follow them. He thought to himself, "These three guys have really bad characters. They really hate evil as if it's their own enemy. I don't know if I should say that it's good that they're upright, or that they're pedantic. No wonder they're not tolerated by others. I wanted to make friends with them, but it seems like it's not enough. Forget it, I'll wait and see." He followed the three of them to the great hall of the alchemy pavilion. Many disciples were bustling about. Yen Shu was already waiting for them outside the hall. When he saw the four of them, he took out 4 jade archives and handed them to them. He said coldly, "This is your mission for today. Those who fail to complete it will be severely punished." Seeing that Ling Feng and the others had released their divine sense to examine the jade archives, Yu Qianqiu was about to do the same. Suddenly, he saw 3 people walking out of the great hall. He knew all 3 of them. The ones walking in front were Guan Weiwu and Elder Fei of Wanfan Garden. The 2 of them were talking as they walked. Behind them was a beautiful woman. Yu Qianqiu had met her once before. She was the woman he had met in the shop on Fuxian Island, in the 100 Flowers Valley. He remembered that there was a man with this woman. The 2 of them looked very similar. He guessed that they were either brother or sister. The 2 of them addressed Elder Qin as senior uncle. Obviously, they didn't use the messy form of address on Fuxian Island. The shopkeeper in the shop addressed them as young palace master in young Mississippi. It seemed like this girl had a powerful background. When they walked to the side of the few people outside the hall, Elder Guan, who had always been domineering, actually said to Elder Fei politely, "Please." Elder Fei smiled bitterly and said, "Just don't push my Wanfan Garden too hard in the future." The arrival of the 2 alarmed the crowd. One after another they greeted, "Elder Guan, Elder Fei." Only Yu Qianqiu called out, "Greetings, master." It was unusually ear-piercing, and attracted the attention of the crowd. When Guan Weiwu saw that it was Yu Qianqiu, he happily nodded at him. Clearly, it wasn't as Ling Feng and the others had said, that this muddle-headed master would forget who his disciple was. When Elder Fei saw that it was Yu Qianqiu, his face twitched slightly, as if he had recalled some unpleasant memories. Then, he rolled his eyes and stared at Yu Qianqiu, enunciating each word clearly. "So it's Yu Qianqiu." There was something wrong with this old fellow. Could it be that he was still brooding over the immortal supporting token? Yu Qianqiu suddenly felt that something was wrong. Thinking that this was the alchemy pavilion, he couldn't do anything to him. So he greeted, "Greetings, Elder Fei." "You are Yu Qianqiu?" The woman behind the 2 elders suddenly asked, and then stopped talking. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. How did she know me? It seemed like I was very famous on Fuxian Island. Elder Guan looked at the woman strangely and asked, "You knew him before?" The woman shook her head and didn't say anything. It seemed like she was thinking about something. Elder Fei smiled mischievously and said, "Elder Guan, I have something to ask of you." As he spoke, his eyes were obviously staring at Yu Qianqiu with bad intentions. It made the latter's heart beat faster. Elder Guan also looked at Yu Qianqiu and frowned. "What's the matter?" "Elder Guan, you also know that my myriad fragrance garden is short of manpower. The sect leader also said that he would transfer some people to me. I see that your disciple is very smart. Why don't you lend him to me for a while?" Elder Fei said indifferently. "Ah." Yu Qianqiu let out a strange cry. This old fellow was obviously using his position to take revenge. If he really went, who knew what would happen to him? Immediately, a pitiful expression appeared on his face as he looked at Guan Weiwu. Elder Guan didn't say anything. He was a pill addict, not an idiot. Naturally, he could see that Elder Fei had bad intentions for his disciple. On the other hand, Yin Shu seemed to see something fishy. He looked at the pitiful Yu Qianqiu, and then looked at Elder Fei, who had a sinister smile on his face. He smiled thoughtfully. "Why? Elder Guan, you can't bear to part with your disciple?" Elder Fei asked. His eyes glanced at the woman behind him. Elder Guan also looked at the woman and sighed. He said to Yu Qianqiu apologetically, "Yu Qianqiu, go to Elder Fei's myriad fragrance garden and help him for a while. When you come back, I will personally teach you the way of alchemy." "Master, can I not go?" Yu Qianqiu begged. "How dare you?" Yin Shu shouted. "A qi refinement stage disciple dares to bargain with an elder of our pavilion. Do you still have any respect for Fuxian Island's rules?" Yu Qianqiu was startled. "Mother ***, what did I do to provoke you? My life is already bitter enough. So why did you run over to join in the fun? Seeing me sucking up to you. Do you really not know who you are? Now that my future is uncertain, I don't care who you are." He was immediately enraged. He opened his mouth and shouted even louder than Yin Shu. "Yin Shu, shut up. Who do you think you are? What does it have to do with you that I am talking to my master? Since when did you have the right to interrupt an elder's question? Do you still have any respect for Fuxian Island's rules? Do you think that just because your father is an elder, you don't care about the other elders? Do you really think that Fuxian Island belongs to your family? In front of my master and Elder Fei, it's not your turn to show off your might. Get lost." Chapter 56. His words were too vehement, and his voice was loud enough that everyone outside the grand hall could hear him. In an instant, the entire hall fell into a frightening silence. Everyone turned to look at him, and almost everyone was dumbfounded. Ling Feng and the other two, who were initially mocking Yu Qianqiu for sucking up to him, had their mouths wide open in disbelief. Elder Guan and Elder Fei were also a little dumbfounded. On the other hand, the young woman didn't understand the gravity of the situation, and was a little flabbergasted by everyone's expressions. Yin Shu's face was green and red at the same time. His eyes were protruding out of their sockets, and he pointed at Yu Qianqiu with a trembling arm. It seemed that he was extremely angry. Guan Weiwu, who was standing at the side, shouted, "Enough!" Then, he looked at Yu Qianqiu and said in an irrefutable tone, "It's decided then. You will follow Elder Fei to the myriad fragrance garden to help out." Seeing that the outcome had been decided, and that there was nothing he could do to change it, Yu Qianqiu silently nodded. "Then let's go." Elder Fei smiled as she crossed her arms in front of her stomach. She then led the way down the mountain, and the young woman followed closely behind. Yu Qianqiu passed the jade archive in his hand to Ling Feng, then bowed to Guan Weiwu and said, "Take care, master." Then he left the mountain. Everyone watched his silhouette as he descended the mountain. Only Yin Shu's eyes were filled with resentment. At the same time, there were quite a few people who were looking at Yin Shu with gloating expressions. It seemed that he wasn't that popular after all. Elder Fei leisurely walked down the mountain, while the young and beautiful woman followed suit. Yu Qianqiu lagged behind the two of them by about a dozen meters. If this had happened in the past, he would have followed closely behind the young woman as well. Even if he didn't get intimate with her, it would still be a pleasure to follow behind a beautiful woman and watch her swaying her buttocks. Of course, the premise was that Chu Pinger and the White Fox didn't know about it, and he wasn't in a bad mood. He was indeed in a terrible mood. He had just seen a glimmer of a bright future from the pill formula Jade Archive, when he unexpectedly bumped into Elder Fei. Elder Fei must not have had any good intentions in dragging him to the Myriad Fragrance Garden. From what he knew, most cultivators were at the level of beasts, especially the old ones. Each of them had either lived for more than 100 years, or 200 to 300 years. Their humanity had long been eaten by dogs, and they acted according to their own whims. How dangerous! Elder Fei Danan stopped his footsteps and turned his head to look at the dejected Yu Qianqiu. With a slight smile he shouted, "Yu Qianqiu, come here." Then he continued to walk down the mountain. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. He had no choice but to lower his head when he was under someone else's roof. He was following him now. Without saying a word, he eagerly ran to Elder Fei's side and said with a flattering smile, "Elder Fei, what instructions do you have for me? If there is anything, just tell me. I, Yu Qianqiu, will not hesitate to climb a mountain of swords or plunge into a sea of flames." Looking at Yu Qianqiu's despicable face, Ferdinand was greatly astonished. The words that were just about to come out of his mouth could not come out. To be honest, when Ferdinand saw Yu Qianqiu, he was indeed a little unhappy in his heart. However, he did not have any intention of harming him. However, he still had the intention of teasing and fooling around with him. Hence, he suddenly thought of asking for him. Just now, when he suddenly saw Yu Qianqiu on the mountain, he could not help but look at Yu Qianqiu in a new light. Nowadays there were really fewer and fewer young people like him. He no longer had the intention of fooling around with him. Instead, he began to care for him. However, this despicable face of Yu Qianqiu and his fearless attitude just now were worlds apart. It was very unappetizing. Ferdinand immediately snorted coldly and said, "Nothing, I just want you to hurry up and follow me." The worse his tone was, the more Yu Qianqiu nodded and bowed, saying yes. Yu Qianqiu was also not willing to follow beside Ferdinand and watch his face. He could not help but find a reason to take a few steps back. He pretended to greet the beauty on the side and said with a smile, "I am Yu Qianqiu, Qi Refining Level 10. May I know how I should address you?" The woman also smiled and replied to him, "Yan Zixia, Foundation Establishment Early Stage. I just entered supporting Immortal Island today, and am under Elder Fei of Myriad Fragrance Garden." "Nice to meet you, nice to meet you. So it is Senior Master Yan." Yu Qianqiu bowed and said. The woman nodded and looked at Yu Qianqiu from head to toe. She also felt strange in her heart. This person is like a completely different person from just now. Myriad Fragrance Garden occupied the largest area among all the branches of supporting Immortal Island. It was also the place with the most abundant spiritual qi. There was no other reason for this. Spiritual qi was needed to grow spiritual grasses. Of course, the land was also indispensable. Otherwise, how could it supply such a large sect? At the same time, Myriad Fragrance Garden was also the place with the most female disciples in the entire supporting Immortal Island. Almost 99% of the female disciples were in Myriad Fragrance Garden. There were probably close to 1,000 of them. Of course, there was a reason for this. Spiritual grasses were different from ordinary herbs. They needed to be carefully cared for. Women were naturally more meticulous than men. They were the best candidates to take care of these flowers and plants. It was also not a very strenuous work. The strenuous work was done by the minority of male disciples. Yu Qianqiu had not been here for long. He did not have the time to understand or listen to others. Thus he did not know about these things. When he stepped into Myriad Fragrance Garden, which was filled with spiritual qi, fresh air, and fragrant air, his eyes were filled with light and graceful figures. There were beautiful women coming and going everywhere. Yu Qianqiu rubbed his eyes. He thought that it was an illusion of some formation. He immediately followed behind Ferdinand. He was afraid that he would go to the wrong place and be trapped by the formation. He did not expect Elder Fei to rescue him in time if he was trapped. When he heard that this group of thin and plump girls respectfully saluted and called Elder Fei when they saw Ferdinand, and that Ferdinand nodded in return, Yu Qianqiu was a little dumbfounded. This was not an illusion. It was real. Myriad Fragrance Garden actually raised so many female disciples? Moreover, all of them were not bad. Damn. Is this Myriad Fragrance Garden or Myriad Flower House? Yu Qianqiu was very shocked. If it was not for this extraordinary environment, he would really suspect that he had come to a brothel. He was immediately overwhelmed. It would be a waste not to look. Ferdinand led the two of them to the main hall of Myriad Fragrance Garden. He called someone over and said a few words. Then, he brought Yin Zixiao away to make arrangements. Yu Qianqiu was still a little dazzled and did not come back to his senses. Ferdinand, who was sitting high in the main hall, stroked his beard and smiled. He had already made arrangements for him. He lightly shouted, "Come." At the same time, he also woke up Yu Qianqiu. A female disciple outside the door hurriedly walked over and saluted. "Elder." Elder Fei pointed at Yu Qianqiu and said, "This is the disciple I borrowed from the alchemy pavilion to help. His name is Yu Qianqiu. Bring him to Majugu. Tell Majugu that the matter of raising spirit grass in Myriad Fragrance Garden will be handed over to Yu Qianqiu." A surprised look flashed on the female disciple's face. She saluted and said, "Disciple understands. What kind of work is raising spirit grass?" As Yu Qianqiu was secretly muttering, he heard Ferdinand ask, "Yu Qianqiu, do you have any dissatisfaction with this elder's arrangement for you?" No, disciple resolutely obeys Elder Fei's arrangement. Yu Qianqiu smiled respectfully. "That's good." Ferdinand waved his hand and said, "Bring him away." "Yes." The female disciple respectfully retreated. Yu Qianqiu vaguely felt that something was wrong. It was not good for him to say anything more. He could only follow the female disciple obediently. Chapter 57. Along the way, Yu Qianqiu was still wondering what the spirit-nurturing grass was for. And who was that Majugu? She must be someone extraordinary for Elder Fei, who was in charge of Myriad Fragrance Garden, to call her aunt. Thinking about this, he felt slightly nervous. The female disciple who led the way at the side sized Yu Qianqiu up from time to time. Naturally, it wasn't because she had taken a fancy to him. With his ordinary appearance that was at the bottom of the pile of ordinary people, there were probably very few people that would take a fancy to him. She was also wondering who this person was. Elder Fei personally borrowed him from the alchemy pavilion. Why did he make him do the work of nurturing the spirit herbs? The female disciple suddenly recalled a rumor a few days ago. There was an itinerant cultivator who entered supporting Immortal Island with an immortal supporting medallion. He was the disciple of Alchemy Pavilion's Elder Guan. It was said that dozens of elders fought fiercely for the immortal supporting medallion. In the end, it was Elder Guan who obtained the immortal supporting medallion. That itinerant cultivator's name was Yu Qianqiu. Could it be this person? Thinking about this, the doubts in her heart were easily resolved. When she looked at Yu Qianqiu again, a trace of pity appeared in her eyes. Yu Qianqiu felt gloomy. He looked at the scenery of Myriad Fragrance Garden to relieve his worries. There were all kinds of spirit herbs planted all around the garden. Smelling the refreshing fragrance, there were many beauties working in the garden. There were all kinds of terrains in the Wanfen Garden. There were high hills, low depressions, and flat lands, and all kinds of spiritual herbs were planted everywhere. There were also many flowers and fruits. The colorful spiritual herbs swayed in the breeze. Occasionally, when the wind was strong, the hem of a skirt would be blown up, and a delicate hand would be pressed down. It made one's imagination run wild. What a great place! It turned out that spiritual herbs and beauties were also a pretty good scenery. Yu Qianqiu's worries eased a lot. At the same time, he couldn't help but admire the eyesight of the major sects in the cultivation world when it came to accepting disciples. Not all of the female disciples were outstanding beauties, but because they all cultivated their bones, their appearances were much better than ordinary mortals. Of course, not everyone with a good bone structure had a good appearance. There were some people who were ugly but talented, but they were in the minority. All in all, as far as the eye could see, the spiritual herbs were all pretty girls. There were also women who were in their prime, and were slightly more mature and alluring. Yu Qianqiu was a little absent-minded as he wondered if he had arrived at Woman Land. They arrived at the foot of a mountain. It wasn't really a mountain, but it was at most a slightly higher hill. However, it occupied quite a large area. There were very few trees around the hill, and most of them were covered by various kinds of spirit herbs. The entire hilltop was occupied by an antique courtyard. It was obvious that it was a building that had existed for a long time. Although Yu Qianqiu's cultivation level was not high, along the way, he noticed that the spiritual energy nurtured by this mountain was the most abundant. The spiritual energy had already condensed into a faint mist. The female disciple stopped and reminded him, Yu Qianqiu, this hilltop is the residence of consecrated Aunt Gio. Consecrated Aunt Gio doesn't like noise, so don't make too much noise later. Yu Qianqiu thought that she was reminding him out of kindness, but from the faint fear on her face, he could see that she was afraid that he would implicate her. The two of them were not familiar with each other, let alone a woman, so he didn't mind. He looked at the building on the hilltop and asked, Is consecrated Aunt Gio the Ma Gio that Elder Fei mentioned? Lower your voice. The female disciple seemed to be startled by his words. Ma Jiugu is not someone we can call, she said in a soft voice. Elder Fei only calls her that in front of us, but he would never dare to call her that in front of Reverend Jiugu. Consecrated Aunt Gio used to be the aunt of the former sect leader, and also the previous elder, who presided over Wanfen Garden. Her cultivation level has reached the late stage of passing calamity, and even the current sect leader has to greet her and call her Aunt Gio. Yu Qianqiu replied with an, "Oh," and looked at the hilltop. He thought, so it's Ferdinand who wants to save face. But why did he send me to the old monster's place? Does he want to use the old monster to kill me? He wondered who would be stronger in a fight between the old monster and his sister. Both of them were in the late stage of passing calamity. Let's go, the female disciple said. Yu Qianqiu nodded. He had originally wanted to get close to her and ask her what her name was. But seeing how timid she was and how she could barely be considered a beauty, he gave up on that thought. Going up the bluestone stairs to the hilltop and standing outside the wall, Yu Qianqiu found that the courtyard was really big and the wall was really high. The tall courtyard gate was open, and there was no one guarding the gate. He raised his head and looked at the three big words Mulberry Garden engraved on the top of the courtyard gate. Then, he followed the respectful female disciple and quietly walked in. As soon as he entered, for some reason, Yu Qianqiu suddenly felt that the surrounding temperature dropped a lot. The inside of the wall and the outside seemed to be two different worlds. Walking through the dark courtyard surrounded by trees and green vines, his eyes suddenly opened up. There were all kinds of strange flowers and plants. There were actually mini gardens inside, and they were also planted with spirit herbs. In each garden, there were one or two young girls working. Fortunately, the appearance of the young girls here seemed to be a grade higher than what he saw outside. A beautiful and dignified woman greeted the two of them with a smile. The female disciple hurriedly bowed and said, "Elder Lan." This made Yu Qianqiu also bow. That Elder Lan smiled and said, "What brings you here?" The female disciple pointed at Yu Qianqiu and replied, "This person is a disciple that Elder Fei borrowed from the alchemy pavilion. His name is Yu Qianqiu. Elder Fei said that he will be sent to Jiugu to worship the spirit herb." Yu Qianqiu, spirit herb? Elder Lan was stunned. Her eyes paused on Yu Qianqiu and then she frowned and said, "What the hell is Fei Dinan doing? All right, leave him to me. You can go back." Yes. The female disciple obeyed and left. After listening to their conversation, Yu Qianqiu only felt uncomfortable and secretly cursed in his heart. Damn. Since when did I become a thing that can be sent here and there? You come with me. Elder Lan smiled. Yes. Yu Qianqiu obeyed the order and followed her. As they passed through several spirit herb gardens, Yu Qianqiu thought to himself that the spirit herbs planted here were definitely more precious than those planted outside. He couldn't help but look around, and to his surprise, he discovered that he had seen many of the spirit herbs in the pill recipe jade archive. He followed the woman to a courtyard. Once he entered the courtyard, he suddenly felt that the temperature had dropped a lot. He saw a well in front of him, When he walked past the well, he felt even more bone-chilling cold. Yu Qianqiu shivered from the cold. Although his cultivation level wasn't high, it was not a problem for him to be impervious to heat and cold. He didn't expect this small well to be so powerful. It was as if the temperature of the entire mountaintop was low, because of this well. He couldn't help but glance at the well. The water wasn't deep, and he could see it by tilting his head. Strangely, even though the temperature was so low, the well water didn't freeze. It gave the courtyard an even greater sense of mystery. In the courtyard, a white-haired old woman was holding a young and beautiful girl's hand as she spoke. When Yu Qianqiu saw the girl, he was stunned. It was Yan Zixia, whom he had parted ways with not too long ago. Why was she here? He felt strange. When he got closer, he realized that the old woman's face was full of pockmarks. He couldn't help but think of the majugu that Elder Fei had mentioned. The old woman turned her head and swept a glance at Yu Qianqiu. Her calm gaze actually made the latter's heart palpitate. She opened her mouth and spoke in an aged voice. "Little Lan, who did you bring here?" Yan Zixia was obviously curious as to why Yu Qianqiu would be here. The two of them nodded at each other. Chapter 58. Hearing the old lady's question, Elder Lan pouted like a little girl and muttered, "Ferdinand sent someone to deliver it to you. He said it's for you to grow spirit herbs. It's simply nonsense." Elder Lan's words proved that the old lady in front of them was Majugu. But looking at the way she spoke, she was full of worry and disgust. She didn't look like the beautiful and dignified woman from before. Thinking that most of the elders in Fuxian Island were over 200 years old, a woman over 200 years old acting like a spoiled little girl, it made people shudder. He quickly stepped forward and saluted. "Yu Qianqiu greets Elder Jugu." "Yu Qianqiu?" Ma Jugu seemed to have heard of his name and was stunned. "You're the individual cultivator Yu Qianqiu, who joined Fuxian Island with the immortal supporting token." "Yes, I am. Didn't I hear that Guan Weiwu accepted you as his disciple? Why did Ferdinand send you here? Are you Qi refining level 10? Strange, I can't see through your cultivation." Elder Lan said angrily. "It must be because of the immortal supporting token. The dignified elder in charge of Wanfen Garden is actually so narrow-minded. How could she do such a thing? Elder Jugu, you don't even care." Hearing this, Yu Qianqiu's eyes lit up. Perhaps there was hope of returning to the alchemy pavilion. Damn, if he knew this would happen, he wouldn't have made things so awkward with Yin Shu. Impulsiveness was the devil. "Is that so?" Ma Jugu expressed doubt and laughed. "Ferdinand is your man. If you want to care, you do it. I won't care." Then, he changed the topic and said cautiously, "However, he is the elder in charge of the 10,000 Fragrance Garden now. Regardless of the seniority of anyone in the 10,000 Fragrance Garden, Ferdinand's words are the law. I have to obey this rule. Lan Las, do as Ferdinand says and take him away." Hearing this, Yu Qianqiu's little thoughts that just jumped out sank again. Yes, Elder Lan felt very wronged. Behind her, there was another person who felt even more wronged than her. Of course, it was Yu Qianqiu. When he walked out of the courtyard, he vaguely heard Yan Zixia's voice. She seemed to be calling someone great-grandmother. Was it Majugu? In the blink of an eye, Elder Lan turned back into that beautiful and dignified woman. She went outside and threw Yu Qianqiu to a female disciple named Furong. After giving a few instructions, she left. Yu Qianqiu was depressed. This was the first time in his previous life, and this life that he had been sold out so many times in one day. Although he was depressed, this big sister Furong was really unbearable. She looked so thin that she couldn't even withstand a gust of wind. Half of her face was covered by a scar. If one looked at the other half of her face, and looked at her figure from the back, she would feel like Zhao Fian, who fought against Yang Guifei. She was thin and fat. She was a thin beauty, but one couldn't look at her from the front. Otherwise it would scare people. The clothes she was wearing were a lot older than the clothes of the other Fuxian Island disciples. There were even patches on her shoulders, and a small cloth bag was hanging diagonally on her body. How strange. When Furong saw his gaze, She was actually a little evasive. She seemed a little timid. After joining the cultivation world for so long, this was the first time he saw someone afraid of him. He immediately came to his senses. This girl with half a face either had low self-esteem or was a vicious person pretending to be a pig to eat a tiger. Yu Qianqiu bowed and said, I am Yu Qianqiu, Qi Refinement Level 10. Greetings, big sister. Ah. Half a face Furong was a little flustered. She hurriedly bowed and said, Fu. Furong Foundation Establishment Late Stage. Greetings, Mr. Yu. Foundation Establishment Late Stage. And you still call me Mr.? Yu Qianqiu was stunned. He bowed and said, I don't dare. So it's martial uncle. Furong was a little uneasy from being called that. She said timidly, Elder Lon told me to hand over the matter of raising spirit herbs in the mulberry grass garden to you. Come with me. After saying that, she turned around and left in a hurry. This back view. It's a pity that face. Yu Qianqiu shook his head regretfully. Outside a small room filled with junk, there were 2 buckets, a shoulder pole, and a long ladle. These were the 3 things that Furong gave him. Yu Qianqiu looked at Furong, who was standing at the side as if she had done something wrong. He then looked at the 3 things suspiciously. These 3 things were very familiar. It was a very familiar combination. However, he couldn't remember where he had seen them before. Martial Uncle Furong, are these for me? What are they for? Yu Qianqiu frowned and asked. Spirit raising grass. Furong's voice was almost inaudible. Oh. Yu Qianqiu smiled embarrassedly and said, Hee hee. Martial uncle, I just entered the sect not long ago. This hee hee. I really don't know what this spirit raising grass is for. Please enlighten me, martial uncle. Then come with me, Furong said in a low voice. She reached out her hand to take the 3 spirit raising grass. Yu Qianqiu hurriedly stopped her and said, Let me do it. No need to trouble martial uncle. He could now see that this disfigured young martial uncle was really timid and shy. However, it didn't mean that he didn't know how to read the situation. The 3 items were snatched by him. He carried 2 buckets on his shoulder with a pole, and a long ladle was placed horizontally on the pole. He smiled and said, Martial uncle, please. Furong shyly nodded her head. Her 2 small hands held onto the corner of her clothes, turning it over and over without letting go. She led Yu Qianqiu to the outside of the courtyard and walked along the tall wall for a full 10 minutes before stopping. There was a small ditch under the wall that was connected to a small pool in front of them. The yellowish-brown liquid in the pool gave off an unpleasant smell. The thing floating on it was basically something that everyone was familiar with, feces. To put it bluntly, the pool in front of them was a cesspool filled with feces and urine. Yu Qianqiu looked at the cesspool in front of him, as if he was struck by lightning. His eyes widened. There was no need to explain. There was no need to explain anything. He understood everything. He was born in the countryside in his previous life. How could he not understand? The scene of farmers working hard and fertilizing crops in his previous life appeared in his mind. Spirit-raising grass. Fertilizing spirit-raising grass with human feces and urine? Spirit-raising grass with human feces and urine? Spirit-raising grass with human feces and urine? How could spirit-raising grass absorb this? Yu Qianqiu's face first turned pale, then red, then green, then black. He was already showing signs of going berserk. No wonder these 3 things looked familiar at first. They were used for this. Furong, who was at the side, was so scared that she took a few steps back. Yu Qianqiu could be heard shouting with a choked throat, F***CK. Raising bullsh *T spirit raising grass. Ferdinand, you have guts. You want me to carry feces? The things on his shoulder were thrown to the ground. Looking at Yu Qianqiu, whose eyes were red and who was panting, Furong's hands clenched the corner of her clothes tightly. Her delicate knuckles were white, and there were tears at the corner of her eyes. She said with a slightly choked voice, Mr. Yu, you don't have to be angry. This is what I'm doing anyway. You don't have to do it. I won't tell Elder Lon. You can rest at the side. She carefully moved over and slowly squatted down. Her pale little hands picked up the things on the ground and put them away. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.